All right, I guess I don't have internet anymore.
Thank you for your patience. We are now live on YouTube and recording on WebEx.
Thanks, Catherine.
Ready?
Ready.
All right. Good morning and welcome to the March 15, 2024 meeting of the New York State Commission on Forensic Science. I will be attending this meeting remotely, and in case there are any connection issues, I will have Commission Member Dooley run today's meeting. So over to you, Jill.
Thank you, Commissioner Rosado. At this time, I will take attendance to establish that we have a quorum. As there are members from Albany and virtually, we'll conduct the roll call through this, and then the rest we're going to switch over to the Fitz method of yay, nay, or abstain. So this is the only time you're going to get called on until the end. All right. Please respond when I call on you. Commissioner Rosado?
Present.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Present.
Judge Mazzarelli?
Present.
Dr. Chitlin?
Present.
Dr. Buffalino?
Present.
All right. Ms. Goldthwait?
Present.
Ms. Rausch?
Present.
Mr. Epstein?
Present.
Ms. DeCastro?
Present.
Dr. Marciano?
Present.
Ms. Schmitz?
Present.
All right, including myself, we have established a quorum. Next up, we have received an updated draft agenda for today's meeting. Is there any discussion regarding the agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Lydia
Which
Hesbit?
one?
The most recent one. The most up-to-date. Okay.
The one that's the colorful one.
There we go. And Fitzpatrick is seconding. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Abstentions? All right, with that, the motion carries. You also have received draft minutes from the December 15th, 2023 meeting. Are there any questions or comments? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Michelle has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
5 seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Did someone nay?
Oh, that was
No one nay, that was just my echo? Okay, any abstentions?
Abstain.
Lydia abstains, the motion carries. Next, we'll move on to accreditation and laboratory updates section of the meeting. Today's agenda includes informational updates and one accreditation vote. We'll start off with the Monroe County Forensic Toxicology Lab. This is for informational purposes and no vote is required. The lab has notified the commission that Assistant Chief Toxicologist David Nemeth has retired. Dr. Nemeth's position remains open at this time. Are there any questions for the lab? We do have someone available virtually to speak. No? All right, congratulations on your retirement. Next up is the Nassau County Medical Examiner Division of Forensic Toxicology. Again, this is also for informational purposes and no vote is required. The lab has notified ANAB and the commission that Chief Toxicologist Dr. Joe Avella has retired. Timothy Hahn, the QA/QC coordinator, has assumed the role of acting director. Are there any questions for the lab? A very good retirement to Dr. Avella. New York City OCME Department of Forensic Biology. This is a vote required as there is an ANAB activity. In October of 2023, the lab underwent a full ANAB reassessment. During that assessment activity, the laboratory reduced its scope and removed epithelial cells under their qualitative determinations. The laboratory received and remediated the 3 nonconformances. ANAB has issued a full renewal of accreditation. At its February meeting, the subcommittee issued a binding recommendation in the discipline of biology. Are there any questions for the lab? We do have folks available remotely to speak. Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the binding recommendation to renew the New York State accreditation of the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology, and the Discipline of Biology, and issue full renewal of the New York State accreditation concurrent with its ANAB accreditation to expire February 28th, 2028?
Jill, I'm
Mike,
sorry,
Mike.
after you finish that very long vote, I just wanted to ask if anyone thought it might be wise to delay the vote until after we discuss, I think it's under new business, old business, or disclosures, but what's been going on with the lab, since I think it affects whether we accept the DNA subcommittee's binding recommendation.
We concur.
Well, isn't it a binding recommendation?
Yeah,
So
I understand that.
yeah.
I'm sorry, Judge, go ahead.
No, just because I thought it was a binding recommendation and we really didn't have discretion to go beneath their recommendation
That's my understanding as well, but, and please, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we did have the ability, if we thought more work needed to be done, to send it back to the DNA subcommittee for further consideration, and then it would come back to us with more information from the subcommittee. Is that correct?
She's correct.
So I think we can still make the motion, and if the votes are there, then we, unless, oh, so are you making a motion to postpone the vote?
I suppose I am. I make a motion to postpone the vote until after we've had an opportunity to discuss the other issues concerning the OCME Forensic Biology Department on the agenda today.
I second the motion.
Could I ask a question? That discussion we're going to eventually have, will that be in open session or executive session?
Some of the discussion is in open, and there is also some executive.
Some executive, okay.
I think you have laboratory disclosures. Is that what Jess was referring to?
Are you, yeah, Jessica, are you referring to the laboratory disclosures that come up later in the open session?
Yes, thank you.
So, disclosures, yes. All those in favor of supporting Commission Member Goldthwait's motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Are there any abstentions?
Nay.
Bev abstains. With that, the motion does not carry. So then I will say that all again. Do I have a motion to accept the binding recommendation to renew the New York State accreditation for the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology, in the Discipline of Biology, and issue a full renewal of New York State accreditation concurrent with its ANAB accreditation to expire February 28th, 2028? Mike has made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Michelle seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Are there any abstentions?
Yes.
Yes, Goldthwait.
And Epstein.
Goldthwait and Epstein abstain. With that, the motion does carry. Next, we'll move on to the New York City OCME Forensic Anthropology Unit. This is for informational purposes. No vote is required. In November of 2023, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity, and there were no findings. ANAB has issued a continuance of accreditation based on the results of the assessment activity. We do have members available virtually to speak if there are any questions for the lab. Are there any questions? None, will move on. Next up is the New York State Police Crime Laboratory. This is also for informational purposes and no vote is required. In January, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity. There were no findings. ANAB has issued a continuance of accreditation based on the results of this assessment activity. We do have folks in person. If there are any questions for the lab, are there any questions? Hearing none. I give a pause again because the remote delay, I don't want to miss anything. Next up is the Niagara County Sheriff's Office of the Forensic Laboratory. This is currently for informational purposes. No vote is required. In February, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity. There were 10 findings and 1 opportunity for improvement was suggested. The assessor felt that the lab would benefit from ensuring revisions of the quality manual are carried down from one version to the next. It should be noted that that recommendation is just that and that no action is required. However, the other 10 findings will require some action. Now, with this, let me just skip on down here and say that the laboratory has submitted challenges for 7 of the 10 findings and are waiting for a response from ANAB. They did also submit remediation plans and that they have been approved for the other 3 findings that they are not challenging. You have all of these materials in a combination of places, including your late documents, just like the late night show, right? I will let you know the working group did meet prior to the commission meeting to discuss the assessment report. And we were initially under the impression that the lab wasn't going to challenge, but this has since changed. So now they are challenging 7 of the 10 findings. I can go through each of the findings, or we can have, let's see who's available, Director Giffen and their QA person, Kevin Condell. Can you just bring them up? Because I'm fairly certain we've got some questions. I'll run through the findings just so that we have a basis. 5.4.1, and this was one that they submitted a remediation plan and was accepted, and that had to do with the website not conforming to ANAB's policy on the use of their accreditation symbols and claims of accreditation status. 5.4.2, the laboratory had a significant change in resources and did not communicate those changes to ANAB. Forgive me, hang on one second, because I am losing track of what they did decide and got approved and what they did not. So let me just go through the findings. We'll ask questions and then we can determine if they are part of the challenge or the accepted remediation. 6.4.9, the lab did not initiate their management of non-conforming work procedure when an instrument was taken out of service for repairs. Again, I'm just doing a general overview. So when Niagara gets the opportunity, feel free to correct me if I've misunderstood anything. 7.5.1, several case records reviewed did not identify the methods that were used during analysis. 7.7.2.Li1, not sure at my handwriting here, I apologize. No biology casework was reviewed from June of 2022 through the end of the year. Again, when I say biology, I mean serology. That's the testing that they have there. Staffing issues in firearms have left the lab without the ability to release positive identifications due to the lack of verification and technical review. 7.7.4, the lab's firearms consultant did not complete a PT, inter, or intra-laboratory comparison for the year 2023. 7.11.3, records and limbs became corrupt and had to be reset, and there were no records of a corrective action for this event. 8.7.1, corrective action reports did not include timeframes associated with the completion for each action or review of the effectiveness of the action taken. On 8.8.2, no corrective action has been started on a nonconformity issued during the 2023 internal audit. Those are all of the findings. Again, 3 of them have been set forth with a remediation plan and approved, and 7 are being challenged. I'll turn it over to the lab first to correct anything that I may have misstated, and then we can go over to questions.
Hi, could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make one brief correction, Jill, if I might. You
Yes.
had stated that the 3 that we were accepting had been approved. At this point, we've only submitted resolution of just the very first one. We were working on our challenge materials. So the first, second, and fourth are the ones that we are accepting, and the others we are challenging. We have submitted our remediation for number 1, which is the website. And then number 2 and number 4, we hope to have submitted hopefully by the end of next week.
Okay. So I think I'm going to stop talking and ask if who would like to start if they have any questions regarding the findings.
Well, in terms of questions, there's nothing. Can we do anything now? I mean, or do we have to wait till this is resolved and then?
So, sorry, I had to take a drink there. We are in the process now of where they did submit 7 of the 10 challenges to A&EB.
Right.
And we're awaiting response for if those challenges are going to be upheld or not. And then that would trigger a remediation plan. If they do not accept the challenges, then they have a time frame that the lab has to submit their remediation and get that accepted and then move on. Given the fact that we do have some history in terms of things that we had seen in the past, and also that this, again, I just want to say this was a surveillance assessment that was on site. They did only review 52 of the items, and there were findings on 10 of those.
Right.
Open it up to questions. I mean, I have one question in particular, and that's only because, again, of the special meeting and then the transition that we've had, and now they have a QA director, but I was under the impression that they were set to change their technical review policy prior to, and then to have this finding. I just wanted to ask about that because we did have conversation in June when the working group made the recommendation and the commission had suggested to reevaluate your technical review policy. And I believe, Christine, you stated that you were already considering that and moving to 100% technical review. So then when I see this finding, regardless of challenging it or not, I just have a question as to what has since changed since our conversation in June.
Thank you for the question, Jill. So we have changed our policy. We now require 100% technical review as long as we have 2 people in the discipline. The first challenge, the first instance cited was actually the one that led to the discussion last June, where we were not doing 100% technical review. So we felt like we had resolved it. And then when Kevin, my quality assurance person, started, we had a discussion about what would happen when we were less than 2 people in the discipline. So we actually did have that situation occur where we had an individual where our firearms dropped to 1 person. So we were performing the required technical reviews, and then our person abruptly quit on us. And we have been working on getting an external company to step up to perform that service for us. We've been in discussions on how to handle that at this point about whether we actually back technical review the cases that have gone out. I believe it's around 14 cases have been released since the 1st of January when that individual resigned. And that is where things stand at this point. But every other discipline is doing 100% technical review.
The question with that, though, in firearms, I mean, you need a verifier.
Yes.
At that point. So are you even evaluating casework? Because how would you know starting a case if you're going to need that step? I just think you should.
Please complete your thought.
No, I'm uncertain how you can take on and start casework if you don't have the proper personnel to follow through the entire way and go through with the verification, unless you've made an agreement with another lab or you do have a contractor or some type of service. So I'm a little unclear about that, if you could explain.
Jill, I'll answer this one. Those cases are operations cases. The majority of the cases that come through the laboratory are trying to determine whether or not the gun fires or not, which a technical review on whether or not a gun fires is we have in the past not determined that to require. That's one of the cases we wouldn't send for technical review. Now, since the audit, we have made an improvement to our system that we will technically review 20%, 100% of all the cases that we have that are representative of all of the laboratory discipline, as opposed to just the identification, which is the way that it was once I entered. The verification aspect of it, we're going to send our positive identifications and any negative identifications on individual characteristics for verification to this external reviewer. But verification of whether or not a gun fires at this time, that's not something that we were going to have a verification performed on just due to the limitations. Our plan is to get a second individual into the laboratory to have them trained, and then we would be able to operate at 100% verification technical review, but that process is taking time. We have contracts, we have financial processes that have to take place. So we're moving towards that goal, but currently I've instructed until we get this company that we've vetted and already audited online in order to perform verifications and technical reviews, that we're not to release any cases that require verification. So we're currently in a pause state. We're sending them confirmatory tests next week, and then they will be able to perform those tests. Competency tests next week. They'll be able to perform those tests, and then upon a passing score, we can authorize them to perform that work and start sending them our work. At this point, we just don't have the number of firearms cases to put us in a position where we're in. We just don't have the number of cases that's going to really impact the 20% that we've set for when we drop down to one person. We anticipate that we're going to have a number of cases from this point to the end of the year in order to exceed that goal and that requirement. The ultimate push is to get to 100%. We're just operating in a limited capacity at this point. The 14 cases, correct me if I'm wrong, that we've released are operations. Whether or not a gun fired, that's it.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Good morning. This is Lydia DeCastro. After the individual resigned, did casework stop? So are cases still being analyzed but can't be technically reviewed?
So cases still are being analyzed. The only thing that we are not sending reports out are anything that has needed verification, either for individual characteristics. And that actually started at the beginning of this year. So we actually do have the company, the contract is signed. And, you know, as of, I think when we were writing the March 5th, we had no cases that were waiting. Again, our casework is way down in firearms. So I think almost all of the 13 or 14 cases, I know I asked my firearms examiner to provide me that number, and I believe it was between 13 and 14 cases at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. For the verifications, are you planning to send the evidence out to the company to examine the actual evidence?
That's correct. These are going to be fired bullets. We're not going to send anything of value. No firearms themselves. This company that we have. I mean, we are in the process of getting a second person on site, like I said. But in the meantime, while we have this opportunity, we have to reach out to an external provider and vet them. We've looked into their qualifications, their requirements. These folks have a long history of firearms working in the country. They will be able to meet the requirement that we have to do verifications on positive IDs and on negative results based on individual class characters. So we'll be sending them the bullets. The process for that we've vetted so that the chain of custody is secure. It will go to a PO box, and then that PO box will be picked up by one of two individuals that we would have authorized to perform that work. And it will get returned directly back to the laboratory via courier.
Thank you.
So, man.
Yeah.
I've seen throughout my tenure on this commission, hundreds of nonconformities, and a very, very small number of those are challenged, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully. This seems like an inordinately high number of challenges. And just as I'm looking through them, and I apologize, I've tried to digest this over the last 24 hours. It's a lot of material to look at. But for example, on nonconformity number 10, internal audit finding was not issued as a corrective action. I assume it means without undue delay. And the delay was 59 days. Now, how long does it take to issue a corrective action as a result of the internal audit finding?
The corrective action could be written in a day.
Say again?
The corrective action could be written in a day, sir. The process was ongoing. The drafting hadn't completed.
Okay, so 59 days, I understand undue delay does not say must be done in 20, but why would you challenge that? Why not just say, yeah, that was a delay and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again? And when I'm trying to get a handle, here's one thing I've never seen before in a challenge. It had concern, I assume referring to the lab, it had concerns around the approach of the ANAB lead inspector. And what does that mean? And I want you to be specific. What are you saying? This inspector had it in for you? I mean, don't you realize that you have an issue with this commission and that the better approach would be to take the findings and make the lab better and protect the people of Niagara County as opposed to challenging 59 days as being an undue delay? Is that not sinking into anybody?
Sir, we do understand your perspective and we respect it very much. We realize that we need to make improvements. That is not the basis of our challenge.
All right, well, what were your concerns about the ANAB lead inspector? And I want you to be specific.
Okay. Our concerns regarding the Amy, the inspector, was she seemed to not be either listening to us or understanding what we were saying. So for an example, the Kevin just was talking about the vetting of this external company for technical assessment. We explained on 3 separate occasions, we actually pulled up all of the documentation to explain it, what our process was, what our plans were. And again, she actually did not cite this in this particular inspection report, but when we did our final closing, she stated we had no plan to move forward with firearms. And I actually asked her, well, despite the fact that we had vetted this company that we discussed with you, and she had no memory of it, of that discussion. She was getting very confused, and and then I offered to, when she was actually particularly confused regarding what happened in toxicology. Granted, that was a very confusing situation. I do not have a problem with that confusion. I offered to sit down and write her essentially a timeline so that she could refer to it, so that she would have that. And she basically then immediately stated, I told you no on-site corrections. That's not what I was offering. I was actually offering something to allow her to understand what we were communicating with her. And we just kept having to go over things many, many times. And she would kind of make statements that didn't make a lot of sense. So we were concerned. Again, we intend to take every one of these instances cited and to do follow-up internally, but we actually wanted to document our concerns with the actual findings.
If I can speak further on this, we accepted these originally, and we had even spoken with Jill, that we accepted these originally because we had the intention of putting in, and we still do, putting in corrections so that there's no more confusion, so that somebody doesn't come in, they're going to see we're going well above this standard and there's not going to be an issue. So just because we're challenging something does not mean that we're not going to follow up on it and make sure that it is not addressed again, because we're already addressing these issues and they're going to be addressed. However, we're seeking clarification as a laboratory. There's multiple circumstances here where we've got words like significant or system failure, or like you mentioned, undue delay, that are not well defined in ISO. They're not well defined in ASAP. Sometimes they're not defined at all. And that leaves it up to the laboratory to draw these definitions. And in 2022 and 2023, our own quality manual did not also define these. So we're seeking clarification from ANAB because we felt like what the auditor had done was taken some liberties on what these words mean and whether or not these words were more or less.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to interrupt. All right. I mean, there's a perfect example. The word significant is going to be defined by other words that sound like significant, important, meaningful, impactful. It's like Potter Stewart said about pornography. It's not defined, but I know it when I see it. So significant, I don't understand why you're nitpicking with ANAB about the word significant. If you're in doubt, consider it significant.
We're
59 days is an undue delay. I don't understand it for the life of me.
Well, I think 59, so to speak to the 59, I think the issue is not that the time frame in A and B is not defined. It's that you didn't define a timeline, right? Like that's the crux of the issue is your management structure did not, and your corrective actions don't evaluate and put on a timeline and a follow through on it. Because I feel like that was in a few of these. Like the common thread was there was no timeline for the completion of a corrective action, right? And then there was undue delay because they didn't put through a time right. So I feel like there was several issues going on with it. But do you feel as if you're answered about the assessor?
I think we need to hear from the assessor at some point in the future. I mean, I assume by the next meeting, these challenges will be resolved and we can have a further discussion then. There's not much we can do today, but right. I appreciate the direction, the quality assurance manager at least answering the questions. But the assertion is, I don't care how it was sugarcoated. The assertion is that this ANAB lead inspector headed in for the Niagara lab. That's what's being said. No, I'd like to hear from him. That's what I heard.
May we address?
Pat. I'm sorry.
I'd just like to follow up. So that the undue delay has a definition associated with it. Undue delay is not a specific time frame. Undue delay means, let's just say you're in a hospital, someone's waiting 2 hours. Undue delay for someone who gets shot with a gunshot wound that's too much delay. But someone who has a sprained ankle in the hospital, 2 hours is probably not undue delay. It's tied to the circumstances. We addressed this incident. That was the problem here. We had addressed this incident. It is already done. We felt like there were other pressing matters we had to get to before we wrote that up because it simply wasn't of risk. This was something that was one technical review that occurred back in 2022, the end of 2022, where the checkbox was not checked, and it should have been checked, but the review was actually performed. We said, is this a bigger deal? We looked into it. We significantly looked into it at the beginning of January. I don't like to draft things until I have all the data. And this is the reason why it wasn't done. That's the only reason, sir. This is, and we want to seek clarification on why is an undue delay defined. We didn't have a definition for it. 59 days, we could write it in 1 day. 2 days, you see, we've challenged all of these. We have addressed all of these in less than 14 days. This is 10 incidents. So it's not a circumstance of the lab postponing something. These are tied up in nuances.
I guess you're missing my point. I mean, Ms. Goldthwait and Mr. Epstein's clients are entitled under the law to a speedy trial. There's a definition of that, but there's also a constitutional right to a speedy trial. It doesn't say 6 months, 10 months, 12 months. It just says speedy trial. So undue delay, I asked you earlier and you said it would take a day to do this. So that's 58 days longer than a day. I get that. And I'm very sympathetic to your argument that it's not an undue delay, but my point is, why challenge it? Why not just say, look, we know we're walking on eggshells here. Undue delay won't happen again. Thank you very much. Conformity, non-conformity resolved. Let's move on.
It's just part of a greater pattern, sir.
Yes.
A greater pattern of a use of terminology that's not well defined in order to cite a violation that we felt was either addressed, there wasn't objective evidence of it being violated in the policy, or it's just part of the law. Had it just been that one, we would have done.
I understand your point. There are 21 other labs that we have not had audited for special reasons that don't have any problem with significant or undue delay definitions. So
That you are aware of, sir.
Pat.
Put people under the bus.
Okay.
Pat, and then, excuse me, Pat, and then Jessica. I see her hand raised as well.
Oh, you know what? Jess was actually before me, so why don't you go first, since I did see your hand before me.
Thanks, Pat. I just want to echo DA Fitzpatrick's comments about all these challenges, and considering, I mean, really, the commission is trying to work with the laboratory to improve the laboratory, and the laboratory has expressed to us willingness to do this and to work on the culture of, accepting error and working on it. And I can't say it better than DA Fitzpatrick, but this really seems to be a step backward in challenging these nonconformities. And look, DA Fitzpatrick, Steve Epstein and I are lawyers that deal with terms like undue delay all the time. But it is distressing. Your laboratory is in trouble, and I know you're working hard to remedy that. But this is not conducive to improving the laboratory, the culture, or trying to work toward a more independent laboratory. And it was distressing to see. So I echo DA Fitzpatrick's comments. I do have particular questions about some of the findings and the challenges, but Jill, I don't think you've finished going through the list, or am I wrong? And also, I don't want to lose track because I know Pat has some comments.
I think I went through the list, but again,
Okay.
they submitted the challenges. There's no response yet from A&EB. Again, we're still kind of in a holding pattern, but
Yeah.
I did have a question, so didn't know if anyone else had a question. But
Yeah, I do have some specific questions, but Pat, did you have something you wanted to dovetail right now, or should I go forward with specific questions?
Go
I'm
forward
happy
with
to
your
wait.
questions. Go forward with your questions because you might answer
Okay.
some of the ones that I had.
Yes, okay, thanks. With respect to the technical review, finding of nonconformity and challenge, I just want to make sure I understand everything here. So there were two parts to both finding and your challenge, is my understanding. Is that right? Okay. And with respect to the biology section and the finding that there were no technical reviews between June and December of any of the casework that went out the door in 2022, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I do see in your explanation as part of your appeal that you did technically review everything from January to June in 2002 in the biology discipline. So that would be 93 cases. Is that right?
That sounds correct, yes.
That sounds correct. Yes, we
Okay.
did do 100% technical review. I'm not 100% sure the number of cases.
It's roughly
Okay.
60% of cases for the year 2022 were technically reviewed, and the policy at the time required 10%.
And I understand that's the basis, but I'm troubled that you think that doing all your technical review in one time period and then not doing anything for a 6-month time period satisfies the requirement and at the very least the spirit of technical review.
We have
That
since
doesn't
amended
seem
that
to make a lot of sense to me at all.
Well, we have since amended that policy, ma'am. This is not justification for it being correct. We have improved our policies. They are now required to be spread out during the time period. We were simply pointing out that.
So then why challenge it?
standard
I'm
wasn't
sorry to
on.
interrupt, but so then why challenge it? Because your remediation is already in place. All you have to do is say that you've already made that improvement, but you're gonna go back and challenge it, which I guess it speaks different to us. Like it's giving mixed signals. No, we've improved that, we've done it, we've changed our manual, but you're still gonna argue about it. So I just wanna ask.
I had my hand up too, and to me, this is, I don't understand why you're taking your time on this challenge. The challenge is taking tremendous amount of time, and I agree with Ms. Goldwaite that the discussion before, the description before, it was absolutely accurate. And the word undue delay. The undue is not a particular number, undue delay. Undue delay relates to what the issue is. In one instance, an undue delay could be 24 hours. In another instance, an undue delay could be 2 years. It depends on what the issue is. And to me, the 59-day delay in that instance is on its face undue. So, but why argue about it? Why waste your time doing that stuff when we have so many more important things to do?
To answer your question, ma'am, we had originally decided to accept all of these and perform a correction for them. We did speak to our ANAB accreditation manager, who seemed to strongly suggest to us that we should make use of the challenge process after explaining to him the circumstances and asking for further clarification on what some of these words meant. And when our accreditation manager was admittedly not able to give us specifics like we were asking for, he said, please be aware that there's a challenge process, and in some of these circumstances, these are situations you can visit. He also pointed out to us the complaint process and just the standard. This is standard work. We have addressed these. We have all of the nonconformances actually addressed on file. This was something that we did on Monday and Tuesday to decide to challenge these simply for the purposes of seeking clarification on how we can improve our process going forward. We don't want to make a rule in our laboratory and then tell our folks to follow that and then find out that we made the incorrect call on an ill-defined standard. We want to make sure that we get some record from NAB saying, when you drop down to one person in your discipline, that is significant. That's something you should be telling us about, no matter when it happens, how it happens. One person, you report to us. We would have disclosed at 0 before that. We did not know 1 would be something that would be significant at that time. So now we're under the impression 1 is when you disclose. So now we disclose on 1. These are improvements that we want to make. We just need clarification. Is it 2 when you drop to 2, when you drop to 3? What's significant? So that's the only goal for us here, is to determine.
Well, if you doubt
ANAB
it's significant, why not just report it anyway? If you're not sure if it's significant or not significant, err in the area of reporting it. Then you'll be covered. Then you'll be accurate.
That's fair. And
That is a fair
that's
assessment.
the ultimately why we decided to accept that finding number 2 that was on disclosures, and that is the process that we'll be doing forward. You'll get a lot of disclosures from us. Just everything.
Go ahead, Michelle.
People are going on
Kevin-
vacation in a few weeks. You'll get that.
I mean, to me, you're wasting your resources.
Kevin, can you just confirm for us, is firearms the only discipline you only have 1 analyst in?
Yes, that is correct. That is the
So
only
that's the
discipline.
only discipline that you're not doing 100% tech review in?
That is correct.
Yes. For example, in a week and a half, we're going to have our one of our toxicology and seize drugs people go on vacation
2 weeks.
for 2 weeks. And you're going to get a disclosure on that because we won't be able to perform technical review during that time. So we're not going to do casework during that time.
I don't think that's the intent behind notification. I mean, I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
not a
that's
lab
correct.
director anymore, but maybe the lab director can. Do you disclose if you have someone go on vacation because your process? So here's the difference. Let me just say, they didn't leave. It's not like when they come back, the work is still not in the queue. It's just saying that it's not getting to that point in the process. You guys couldn't even do that process because the person wasn't there to do it. I think that's a different, I mean, again, I am no longer a lab director,
That's fair.
but I would say I'm not going to disclose every time someone goes on vacation because they pick it up when they come back from vacation. It's not that they're not employed there anymore. I don't think that's the intent
But
behind
the
it.
point is,
Exactly.
during those 2 weeks, we will not be able to release any casework because that casework is not being technically reviewed. So now we are actually stopping the process of our laboratory. So that is something that, based on the discussions that we had with this lead assessor, that would be something that needs to be disclosed. So
Christine, have you ever considered changing your process slightly? So if you are in a situation where reports need to go out, perhaps they're technically reviewed after they're released, after released, and then if there is an amendment, the amendment would then follow? Have you considered, or perhaps external tech reviews?
So we did actually discuss that, both Kevin and myself. Yes, and
I told her no, because I don't want to assume the risk of releasing a report to a client and then having a tech review come back and finding something like a typographical error on a report that changes.
But you'd rather release the report with no tech review, or are you going to hold those reports?
we're going to hold those reports for those 2 weeks. Yes.
So you would just notify your customer that the report will be delayed slightly?
Yes, but according to what the lead assessor told us, that is something that we need to disclose to both ANAB, and then of course, because every time we talk to ANAB, we, also disclose to DCGS. That is something that we will disclose. Again, we were provided some very inconsistent information by this lead assessor, and we were getting different responses to the same questions we were asking.
In 2022, when the lead assessor himself, who was being audited by somebody else, came on site, they took a look at that situation where we dropped one person in biology. They considered that acceptable at the time. And now we have a different assessor from ANAB who comes on site who tells us a different thing. And as a laboratory, you have to understand, it makes us very confused. We want some more clarification.
Jill, may I suggest that we put a pin in it and let's wait until we see what ANAB says and move on, because there's so many question marks and there are things that I'm already forming responses and opinions that may not be appropriate based on what comes next. So do we need a motion or can we?
No, I mean, this was, so first of all, let me just go back and say this was for informational purposes. Again, wanted to let folks know that the working group had met beforehand, before the commission meeting, but then subsequent to that, there was additional documents, which you all unfortunately got super late for the challenges. And if there were any questions regarding that, because some of the theme of what we were talking about in previous meetings was also in here. So I just, particularly for me, the tech review one just resonated because I was like, wait a minute, I'm confused because my memory recalls them saying, we're changing this, we're making it 100%.
I agree.
And then
with
to go
you.
back. So then that's why I just needed more clarification on that.
But
for
now
me.
we're back to a totally different aspect of technical review where now I think that all the lab directors on the commission are not in sync with what is being said to us here. So it's just going to be so much discussion that's going to kind of snowball. So I totally understand why you started off this way, but I think we'd be here all day trying to glean what's the true issues here.
I did want to just say, did you have a question or concern? Because I saw your, and Pat's still, Mike, Pat's still in the hopper, but I'll get to you, Pat.
From an outside lab, it just seems when this escalated, when they lost that individual person and they changed from 100% review to looking for an outside agency, going to 20%, like that alone seems significant. And so in my opinion, that seems to be a significant event, which should have been reportable.
And this is for my clarification.
Which is where
going
we're
back. I'm sorry.
We did accept that. I think the commission may be, there are a lot of findings and a lot are being challenged. The disclosure finding is not being challenged.
My question really is for my clarification. What I think I heard in terms of the challenging, and I have to agree with Bill, the judge, Jessica, and others, are you challenging these findings for the sake of clarification? Is that why you're challenging?
Yes,
so
yes, sir.
Why do you have to challenge for clarification? I might be ignorant to this, but why can't you just ask for clarification?
I'll give you a brief example. Number 8 and number 9 are based upon their corrective action specific elements. So if you have a corrective action, these things must be done. Number 1, timeline, and number 2, that you have to monitor the effectiveness of the corrective action. Our laboratory argues we did not have any corrective actions because nothing proceeded. We actually there was a checkbox that was inadvertently marked in a work report that said corrective action was necessary. This was addressing an incident that occurred where an analyst, a trainee, during training samples, swapped samples, and the trainer caught that. So the laboratory reported it as a nonconformance, but this was not on casework. It would never go to corrective action. We expressed to the auditor, this was a checkbox that was checked inadvertently. It was just a typographical error, and no corrective actions were issued by the laboratory in 2023, but we were cited for not performing specific corrective action elements. And that is why we don't feel like the objective evidence is matching what was cited. So we seek clarification.
So you went from accepting all of them, and then you said you spoke to the accreditation manager, and this accreditation manager must have told you that in order to get clarification, you have to challenge. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, sir. So first of all, I want to be absolutely clear. He did not address any elements directly related to our inspection report. That would have been inappropriate, and we would not do that. We had asked him specific situations regarding hypothetical situations. In addition, we did express to him some of our concerns regarding the approach of the lead assessor. And that is when he explained the challenge process, the complaint process. Because while we initially accepted all of these findings, and just as you guys suggested, accept them, change, resolve them, we had already resolved a lot of them, and we were not being able to communicate that with her.
That's your
And so we were getting more and more confused. And as Kevin was writing the resolutions to these nonconformities, we were even getting more confused. So that's when we reached out to the accreditation manager, had that conversation, and that's when we thought about it over the weekend, and we came back and we said, I am not just going to accept things because I do need to know what the box is. Kevin explained to me at one point, and I actually like this analogy. We live in a world with check boxes, and the words of ISO 17025 and AR 3125 define the limits of that box. We need to know what those limits are in order for us to be able to live within that box and understand when we are stepping over the edges and when we are not.
Some things are very clear, but other things are not always clear. To go back to the example, the 8 and the number 9 corrective action that we had, where the checkbox wasn't correct, the checks, the timelines, everything. We have already improved our form to include timelines, not just for corrective actions, but also for corrections. We've added this stuff in there. Monitoring of the effectiveness. We've had monitoring on our forms already. We presented that to the auditor. The auditor did not accept our form, which was on file beforehand as an acceptable way of monitoring corrective actions, even though it specifically states monitoring addresses every element of the corrective action. The date that it was monitored, the effectiveness of the corrective action, it's all present on that form. This form was in place at the time the auditor arrived. We also had timeline elements in our narrative. We decided to expand those to make them specific checkboxes so nobody can ever make the mistake that they weren't done. This stuff was there. We just did not have an opportunity prior to when the auditor came on site to demonstrate the use of this form.
I did see Stephen had his hand, but first we have Pat in the hopper. So let me just get to Pat because he's been waiting patiently, which is not something he normally does.
I know the new Pat Buffalino, I guess. Good morning. And understanding that you guys have the right to challenge any nonconformity that you see fit, I still do want to address just 2 points out of the 10. And because again, I'm more so for waiting for Amy to make a decision, but there are a couple things that I feel pressing. So the first one has to do with firearms. Because it was one of my big concerns when I was asked to join the working group was just the competency testing, the proficiency testing, and so forth. Really, it just didn't meet the requirements at the time and so forth. So in the discipline of firearms, you've now made that decision. And it looks like in June of 2023, we as a commission, you as a director, agreed to the 100% tech review, and it was in process. And I understand the one person being available. The question I have is on 12/28/23, the laboratory made a decision as part of their quality assurance manual that it was going to be, I believe, 20%. Was that ever communicated to DCJS real time, or is this the first that we as commissioners are finding out that that you didn't go with the 100% that we agreed on in June?
So this was not directly communicated to DCJS to answer your question. It was based on a discussion that I had upon Kevin's arrival about the practices throughout his knowledge through multiple laboratory systems and doing professional audits. So that is where we made that determination. And so that's the direction we decided to go when we dropped down to one person, correct?
Yeah, as we discussed prior, we always want to get to that 100%, and that 100% is the goal. We have one person in our firearms discipline, and we discussed with that firearms person, and we asked, in your experience with operation of firearms to determine whether or not it worked, is that something that's typically verified or tech review? And he said, no, it's not. It's not something that we would typically expect, because the gun fires, it fires. You don't need to hand the gun to somebody else and for
It's
them to fire
operability,
it.
right? It's not a science. It's a test.
Right. So these are the types of, there's very few cases that we have in this laboratory since the individual left service that would require this to occur. We actually convinced that person to come back on site in the beginning of January to do the remainder of the verifications and tech reviews, and also do a proficiency test for us as close to the new year as possible, because they left. This is actually one of the other findings. They left prior to performing that PT for the year. They were scheduled to do it in December. They left, and we weren't able to give it to them. We convinced them to come back, and they did that test on January 3rd. We issued a deviation to this, but the auditor didn't accept our deviation as acceptable remediation for the circumstances. Now, since then, all the way up until when we wrote our statement, we had 0 other cases that would fit into the category of requiring verification. Now, I understand you on the tech review part. This is why we changed the policy to get the 100%. These are elements that we've done outside of this challenge process, and it may come to the point to where, let's say our challenge is accepted, I may write a corrective action in the laboratory for that one particular event, saying, I believe we should go to 100%. I believe this is the intention of where we need to be. And I told you this in the last meeting, that this is where we're taking the laboratory, to the 100%. We don't ever intend to go backwards from that. This is a transitionary process. That's all it is. And it started a long time ago. We're addressing historical elements here. You see, this is not how the laboratory operates going forward, or intends to operate going forward. It's always the push to 100%.
Okay, that leads me up to my next question regarding proficiency tests. And I know, I could be wrong, but using a proficiency test from another agency might be an issue with ANAB. But at the same time, when I reviewed the notes, it was restoration. Did you feel that was an adequate proficiency test for the year for this individual?
This was the test that we were given. The intention was always to bring that individual on site in 2023 to do a firearm specific test. Actually, this new company that we're bringing on, we have designed a specific technical review / verification test with errors specifically built in to see if they can catch those errors. We discussed this with ANAB, our accreditation manager. He said he thinks it's a great idea. So we're going forth with it. We want to customize these internal tests that we give in order to specifically address the type of work that they're going to be performing. So no, I would agree. The serial number test is inadequate, but it's something. We have something from him in 2023. It is admittedly not something that's done on site, because he comes on site, and that's why we addressed the deviation and said, we're going to get him out here as soon as possible. We tried to get him out in December. He wasn't able to come on site. He said, I'm sorry, I have family stuff. I can be on site at the beginning of the new year. He showed up on January 3rd and did an internal proficiency test for us, and that is on file.
So during the year, knowing that it was it was a restoration, why wasn't a proficiency test given to him sooner in the year?
It was
it
actually
an oversight, or?
No, so he actually had performed one at the end of 22. I believe it was November of 2022. So we had scheduled one for him around November of 23. However, he essentially resigned early November of 23. Then there was some back and forth where he agreed to do technical review, but then he decided he didn't want to do anything for our lab. So there was from the beginning of November 2023 until we were able to get him back on site in the beginning of 2024, he just was not able to come on site. Like, he had already resigned. So we do acknowledge that it should have been done earlier in the year. We were just basically going from a year from when he had performed his last one on site.
That's
Okay,
part
and
of the original
that's he was at Niagara, and then I shouldn't say he, but that individual was at Niagara at the end of 2022.
Yes, we provided him an on-site internally prepared proficiency test that he did under our management system in 2022. He then did the work for us through 2023, and then in early November is when he sent an email just giving us a heads up that he was not going to be doing this anymore. And it had us, we were working to secure an outside agency to cover this work. And then he just abruptly, and he had agreed to do just technical review at that point. And then he just said, I'm not able to do this at all anymore. And that was, I believe, either the end of November or the beginning of December. We then reached back out to him and essentially asked him, I said, we had a couple of two verifications we really needed done that we could not send out until the reports sent out until they were completed. He agreed to come in and just complete that casework for us and did the PT. So we were trying to get him in before the end of 2023. He was unavailable due to family obligations.
And to address your other question, to demonstrate, this is part of my original addressing of the nonconformance before we decided to challenge, and it still did happen. We had one PT test that was internal scheduled for this year. I already had them do it. I moved it forward in the year, and I intend to move everything forward in the year. Nothing's going to be done towards the end of the year anymore. But you have to stagger these. Yeah, you have to stagger these things. It wasn't in firearms. It was in seized drugs. We had a seized drugs weight determination. That was the only internal PT. Everything else is external, so we're following the schedules. But we moved that internal PT forward as a way to demonstrate that we are moving these things forward. We won't schedule them later in the year anymore.
I want to get to Stephen. I want to get to Stephen because he's had his hand up for a while. And then we'll move on.
One last question.
Quickly.
I hope this is an offensive question, but did you have legal help to write these challenges? Is it just, I'm used to reading these, and it seems like there's more in terms of the wording than it is what actually happened that's being challenged.
No legal help. I drafted these.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Stephen?
Great, thank you. So I have two questions. The first one is, how much transparency do you have with the stakeholders in the local criminal justice community? I mean, for example, you could have speedy trial issues on criminal cases. Are the district attorneys aware so that things could be sent to another lab or work could be prioritized? Defendants are also incarcerated. That's a concern as well. But the entire criminal justice community, are they aware of do you have full transparency on this?
I know that the firearms analyst did reach out to the district attorney's office to discuss that they were not able to release verification cases. We did not discuss the technical review of casework, and we have not disclosed yet the fact that our our seized drug toxicologist is going on vacation for 2 weeks, and we will be withholding results for those 2 weeks.
And the second question is, to the extent that reports are going out that you may have had technical review in the past, are you putting that in the reports themselves, that there's no technical review?
So we actually have a form that is included with every single case, and it's divided into administrative review and technical review. And when so every case is automatically given an administrative review. So that is essentially checking, your spelling, your typos, and that kind of stuff. And anyone in the laboratory can do that. Technical review is the portion that is done by somebody who is able to perform casework in that particular discipline. When they perform the technical review, they then check that box. So that is included with every single case, and it is turned over in every single case. Discovery request.
But the report itself that you're turning over, testing, analysis, the report itself, not supporting documents, not documents that may or may not be disclosed to other stakeholders in the criminal justice community, but the report itself, is that it? Is there any indication on it that there was no technical review for this report?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else, Stephen? Okay, James had one comment, and then I think we'll move on.
I just wanted to make one quick comment that basically the issues, the majority of the issues that I see in the citations here involve communication with ANAB. And those are the same issues that this commission's had with you as well. So I just like a plea to work on the communication with both us and ANAB.
And that's why we're accepting that finding, sir. We intend to work on that. Yes.
We've taken steps to do this, and we will continue to do this in the future. We've met with DCJS individually. We've reached out to our accreditation manager. We'll continue to do so. You won't see these types of incidents from us going forward.
All right, Jessica, one last thing, and then we're moving on.
Thanks, Jill. And
Should have listened to you, Lydia.
I tried. Lydia, you said it like 30 minutes ago. I'm sorry. I'm trying.
But I understand. So
Yeah.
I'm just listening.
Go ahead, Jessica.
I was actually going to say I'm sympathetic to Lydia's point, and I mean, it almost as if there's so much information and it came at the last minute, and I know everyone worked very hard. Just want to take a second to commend the staff of OFS for getting us all this information, literally working around the clock to get it to us. So thank you for that, but it was a lot to review. I did have one question. I see, and for commission members, it's page 9911. And for the lab, what I'm referring to is the record of non-conforming work dated January 3rd to 2024. It's about the fluoxetine and the MDA.
Okay. Yes.
I just want to make sure, because there's a lot of stuff going on with the lab, that I understand what is happening. Is this a supplementary corrective action report?
So yes, I had originally disclosed the fluoxetine issue, and then right before, I believe it was the September commission meeting, I asked to reopen that because of the further review of the MDA issue. And so what you have now is I kept the original report and just added an addendum to the fluoxetine, and then we also turned over the MDA as well. And they're kind of bundled into one event. It is a lot of information, I do admit that. But they're kind of tied very tightly to each other. So that's, yes.
Yeah, and you did attempt to explain that in the corrective action report. Just one follow-up question and a suggestion, and this was disclosed for at least the September meeting, but I just want to stress it because I find it of concern, and I think the more information the commission has about this particular issue, the better. And for commission members, this is 99.12. And for the lab, this is just the second page of your record of non-conforming work. I'm looking at the paragraph, a couple of paragraphs from the bottom. And you did disclose this previously, but I'm concerned about I'll just read directly from it. As has been previously mentioned in the fluoxetine narrative, it was discovered that little validation data was available to support many of the methods. That's concerning on its face. I understand that, I'll keep reading. This led the director to review 1 year's worth of analytical data to determine method appropriateness. While it was deemed that the methods were appropriate, ongoing method validation work was necessary to bring them up to current standards, increase robustness, and incorporate additional drugs recommended by ASB ANSI standards that have been published. Are we going to get more information about, this attempt at doing the validation, this year's work, or this review that you conducted, Director, to determine these methods were appropriate despite there not actually being validation work that was accessible to the laboratory, which I think you state elsewhere in the CAR actually caused issues for your analysts in conducting their work that they didn't have the validation to go back to. That's concerning. There's not validation to support methods, and so I just want to know that, and I understand we're moving on, but that's very concerning.
I understand your concerns, ma'am. We, these are historical methods. They have been in place a very long time. They have completed many proficiency tests. That's actually one of the reasons why toxicology does so many proficiency tests. It's kind of a joke that when Kevin started, he was like, "Why are you doing all these?" I said, "Because we cover so many different drugs. We want the additional data to be able to support the work that we do." So we did conduct the review, the data review of that data. We were already in the process of working on validating because we have a new instrument in-house. Our current system is is an older system, and we want to move all of the methods onto the new system and bring them up to current validation standards. I would be happy to turn all of that over if you would like it. I'm just going to warn you, we are validating over 100 different drugs, and they will be validated for multiple criteria. I'm happy to provide all of that if you wish it. It is going to take, we've run into a couple of snags with this validation. We had initially hired a contractor to do the work. The work she was doing was not acceptable. We're now having to find another plan, but we are actively trying to get this done before the end of this year is our goal. So I do want to just make sure you understand it will take some time to complete all of the work that we are doing. But we will be happy to turn all of that over.
I appreciate that, and I think I would certainly like to see it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to move on now. As we know, this will be on our agenda next meeting, and I'm sure we'll have resolution from what ANAB has to say then. So we'll move on. Thank you, Niagara. We are moving on to old business now. Next, I will provide the familial search update. So a summary of updates since the last commission meeting in December. We've had 2 additional applications and 2 searches have been completed. So the cumulative data is 57 applications in total. 42 of those were approved, 13 rejected, and 2 withdrawn. Of the 42 that were approved, 10 are in the search queue, 32 have been completed. Of those 32 that have completed, I am happy to announce that there has been 1 conviction as of our last meeting. Moving on now again, the crime gun index. As discussed in past commission meeting, Governor Hochul proposed last year to allow DNA samples from recovered firearms submitted by law enforcement agencies to generate potential matches in the DNA data bank for criminal investigation purposes and to rule out potential suspects. The crime gun index is a subcomponent of the DNA data bank, and it began on December 4th of 2023. And as of February 29th, 2024, there were 176 profiles uploaded, resulting in 43 CODIS hits or investigative leads. So just wanted to provide that update. Additionally, in old business, Dr. Marciano has submitted a memo for the commission regarding his request that was at the June meeting. Would you like to discuss your memo, sir?
Sure. Just briefly, in the interest of time, I think a couple meetings ago, I discussed a concern about understanding what the authority of the commission actually was in these cases. And this memo is a request to better understand the authority that the commission actually has, given, some of the circumstances we've seen, but also to maybe revisit updating it if it needs to be, based on, the 20 some odd years or more since the section 995B was written. So my request is, again, an outline of the authority of the commission.
I can do that, because honestly, your ethics review training is coming up, so I'm going to send out a memo regarding that anyway, so I can add that to that memo.
Great.
And then, based on that, if we feel additional conversation is needed, we can add it back to the agenda. Yep. Very well. Anything else from anyone else?
Jessica has
Thanks. Yep. Jill, sorry, can we go back to the crime gun index? Can you explain, oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt something else?
No, Fitz was just.
I just said no, Jessica.
Can you explain the change in policy? So this new crime gun index will allow the upload, and please tell me if I'm misstating this, but the upload of DNA profiles that would otherwise be eligible for Estes from recovered guns taken from the body of a person, from a car. Can you just explain exactly what the policy was and how it has changed, so we can understand what's actually going into this index?
I think it's best if I call up the state police for their CODIS assistance on that, because we are getting into territory that I don't want to misspeak based on what our Estes previous responsibilities were, new responsibilities. Director Wickenheiser.
Hi. There's also some folks here from our data bank, so they can feel free to correct anything I'm going to say. So previously we had not been collecting, so certainly forensic DNA occurs on guns, and that can go into all the indices. And up until December 4th, we had not, or that's when we created a special index for gun possession cases. Because if somebody has a gun that is not on their person, how do you make that connection to the gun to say they actually have an illegally possessed gun? So now we can make that connection. And so we created an index specifically for that, as indicated by Jill at the direction of Governor Hochul. We do have a large gun issue in the state. It is a mechanism to provide that forensic profile that can make the connections via the database.
All right, thanks, Ray. Does that answer your question, Jessica?
Probably, but I just want to make sure. So previously, my understanding was that guns, and I would appreciate if you tell me it's the statewide policy or only a city policy, guns taken from the body of a person, if a police officer claimed to have taken a gun off of a suspect, or from a car, or pursuant to a search warrant in someone's home, those would not, any profiles developed from those firearms would not be eligible for upload. Was that a statewide policy or only a New York City policy? Do you know?
So just to enlarge on what you're saying, part of that statement says at the national DNA index. So this is not the national DNA index. This is a state index. Mm-hmm. So we're not uploading them to the national index. So we are following that policy, but you can do it within a state. A state can make that determination.
Sorry, now I'm really confused. You mean now? So let me just be clear about my question. In the past, before this December 2023 change, was it statewide policy that DNA profiles developed from recovered firearms that were taken from the body of a person or from a car or someone's home were not eligible for upload to Estes. Is that true or not true?
So I don't know that we really fully, we were just following what we felt, well, that was the direction for Endus. So we really didn't also do it for Estes. Then essentially with this state initiative, it's like, we got a gun issue and we need this ability to make the connection with possession guns because that's a forensic profile. So, but you can't do it at Endus, but you can do it at Estes. So hence, with the state initiative, we are doing it with this new index.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Judge, I see your hand up.
Yes. I just wanted to mention, with respect to Dr. Marciano's question about the scope of our authority, the Court of Appeals in the case dealing with the familial search discussed the scope of our authority in some detail. So that might be helpful in making your report.
Thanks, Judd. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate the clarification.
My pleasure.
The assist on that. All right, moving along, new business. So first up, we provided the 2023 annual lab summaries. They're each lab's annual certification to the commission that they are in continued compliance with the requirements of their New York State accreditation program. Do we have any questions regarding those? Those have just been provided and certified by each of the labs. We do this every year at every March meeting, same place, same time. Okay. The commission has received a complaint against the New York State Police Crime Lab. The complaint was also sent to ANAB. However, since the complainant has not tried to resolve the complaint directly with the New York State Police Crime Lab, ANAB will not be taking further action at this time. I will note that the items that were spoke about in the complaint were previous items that the commission had already spoke about or taken action. Is there any discussion regarding the complaint?
This is the Brown Guestron
Yes.
complaint. What action did we take regarding the complaint?
There was a referral to the IG's office where they were doing an investigation.
How's that coming?
We have reached out to them and we do not have an update at this time.
I would call that undue delay.
Way to weave it all together.
Pull it together.
Way to weave it all together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Expecting one maybe by next.
I did, hopefully, I did speak with someone yesterday who was going to try and get us some answers.
We'll discuss this at the next meeting.
Potentially, if we have a response from the IG.
I believe the last communication was 2021.
Right. But again, all the matters that were laid out within that complaint have been discussed and dealt with at the commission at some point in time.
First day at TCJ. So I think that was before I was a member. Do you have the documents or minutes of when that was discussed for those? I don't think I'm alone in not, there's a couple new people on this.
It was June 4th, but Jill was kind enough to point that out to me. I've got my notes from that meeting and
of what
Those
year?
discoverable? No, I'm just.
yeah. What would you say, 2021 or no?
There may have been previous
discussion, but I think the last.
Because the only, according to my notes, the only discussion we had was, hey, there's a problem and we're sending it to the IG. And that's it. We didn't do anything else unless somebody.
Well, there were a couple of issues that were outlined in the complaint, some of which were dealt with during open session, some were dealt with executive session, and we can go through and provide those dates and materials that we have to the commission members who may not have been on the commission at that time. But we have our historical vault at the end of the table. She's going to be able to easily produce all of that for us.
So it's best to have a discussion after those of us that have never seen those documents review them and we know whether or not the IG is doing anything with this.
Yes.
Okay.
Council? Okay, so we can do that. Oh, we got a hand? Jessica?
Hi, thanks. in the complaint, there was an attached root cause that was from the New York State Police. Was it ever turned over to the commission? Because I looked back at the June 2021 and I didn't see a root cause report then, but maybe it came later, or was that never provided by the New York State Police to the commission?
I don't believe it was provided. If you could
Yes,
just,
why
on the complaint, what page are you talking about of the materials that we have? Again, I know it's not page numbered because it was separate and aside, but of the 26.
I think it's attachment A. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And attachment B.
I'm going to it right now.
His name is in there, right?
So attachment A and B are both, well, A is the root cause analysis worksheet, and then B is, hang on, I'm so sorry, I've got like a million screens open and tiny print, corrective action tracking form. That's the one you're speaking of?
Yeah, I'm actually speaking to the entirety of A and B. I wanted to know, obviously we have them now in connection with the complaint. So the person filing the complaint provided those to the commission. So the commission has them now. To be clear, were they provided in 2021 by the New York State Police? And if not, why not? Why wouldn't this be something we got?
I'm gonna, Shelley, just to confirm, we did not, right? I'm recalling we did not receive these documents. And I don't really know.
I can answer that.
I'll get Director Wickenheiser back to the table, and anyone else who would like, we can pull up chairs. I don't want anyone to feel like they're not included because there's only one chair.
Yeah, so we have our quality manager here, Dave Polakowski, if he wants to elaborate. So normally when we're doing root causes, we'll summarize that information in a letter, but we're not going to give you all the forms where we're going through all the checklists and all of that. So we don't normally ever provide those. Certainly we can provide them. We keep all that information. You know, you can be privy to that if you wish. But
I mean, that's something that the inspectors would look at on site when they do their review anyway. They have that
so
documentation.
When the A&AB auditors come through, they always go through that material. And we keep it on hand. It's a requirement for accreditation.
Right.
Can I just ask a couple of follow-up questions?
Sure.
Did you do any additional investigation concerning the difference in conclusion between your firearm examiner and that reached by the Onondaga examiner? Why you came up with different results?
Yes. So that was discussed at it was discussed in an executive session because of that IG open investigation at the time, but I can go into that detail now if there's not a concern. So we
haven't been told otherwise.
Okay, so there was a couple of issues. One was, first of all, that we even did the same analysis on the same item because that's against our policy. So what had happened was a investigator sent in something that they already had analyzed at Onondaga, sent it into our crime lab. We didn't notice that it had been marked because, of course, Onondaga puts their markings on it. Of course, a lot of stuff comes in with different marking from different police agents. We just didn't catch that, so we did a reanalysis on thinking was original analysis. We came up with a finding where we're associating it, saying it was a positive finding. They came up with inconclusive, which is essentially we can't say one way or the other. So in the world of comparative disciplines, particularly because we had a much larger issue sometime previously, which the IG was also investigating, where over 50 cases were reanalyzed and by a third independent lab. And on 9 of those cases, there was a similar difference where one entity said inconclusive and the other made a positive finding. So hence out of that experience, that is not it is a discrepancy, but it's not something that doesn't occur. It does occur. You have differences in visual acuity, opinion, microscopes, essentially where's their line. So saying I can't tell one way or the other, and I think I can, and we have our technical reviewer who also verifies and looks at it themselves by a second independent examiner. We didn't feel that was a large enough, certainly was a difference. We pursued it, and essentially through other circumstances, the individual who authored the report essentially had a car accident and other issues that they never did return to work. So we weren't able to fully follow up with it. But we did have a nonconformity with respect to what did break our policy, which was we weren't supposed to re-examine evidence. So that we had a full root cause on, because that did break our policy. The other, essentially having a difference of opinion, does occur. And the reason it actually did come up was because it was the defense attorney who was provided discovery and noticed, why do I have two different reports? That's how it came to light in the first place. So not only was there full discovery, if you will, they're the ones who actually discovered why do I have two reports, which we have to address it with the investigator, and in turn, it never was used in court.
Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, and Jessica, this may be helpful, but my understanding is this was Utica Police was investigating a homicide, and they got an anonymous tip. You could find the murder weapon under stairs at 123 Main Street, and off they went. They got a search warrant. They went to 123 Main Street. They found the gun. Actually, they got all excited. They figured, well, the tipster was right about that. He's probably right about the gun. No offense to the state police lab, but they don't do things quick enough for this Utica detective. So he sent it to Onondaga, where it was analyzed, and Ray's correct. It came back inconclusive. DA's office knew nothing about this. Utica cop wasn't happy with the result, sends it to state police. And with all due respect, it should have been obvious to anybody that was examined before. It was examined again and came back to be conclusively that was the gun. Dr. Corrado re-examined the gun, came to the same conclusion her staff did initially. And I believe, again, Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, it was sent out to at least one other examiner, I think maybe two, who also came back, at the very least, inconclusive. I think one of them even said it's not a match at all. And then there was a meeting between Onondaga and the state police, and the gun was never used by the DA at trial. The guy was convicted based on other evidence. The gun, I don't think the gun was even mentioned at the trial. But, and Ray, I've never in 20 years on this commission had a problem with you before, but I don't understand why that wasn't brought to our attention, because quite frankly, we would be asking questions about the examiner. Were her case, is it a man or a woman?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Was he, she, were his cases reviewed? How many times did he testify? Were defense counsel notified? Things like that. Because, look, with fingerprints and tool marks on ballistics, the worst mistake you can make is a false positive. The biggest mistake that I've seen in 40 years is insufficient ridge detail for comparison, or this is inconclusive. I can't tell you if this bullet came from that gun. Most times, no harm, no foul. But when you say this bullet came from that gun and you're conclusively wrong, that's a problem.
Okay, so a couple things I want to push back on.
Yeah.
One is we don't know for sure what the answer is. Okay, so when it is a forensic item, nobody knows the ground truth is 1 or 2, or it's an exclusion or it's an inclusion. You have learned experts and they come up with opinions, right? And particularly when it's comparative discipline, there's judgment, there's experience, there's training, all of that goes into it. none of the experts, because we did absolutely, to me, this is a training opportunity, if you will. The fact that people accidentally or otherwise, we have this opportunity to look at, you have difference of opinion, inconclusive versus a inclusion. So all the folks, certainly look at it, and if we can maybe come to some common ground, and maybe there was some correction that needed. The information I had was the folks that considered it inconclusive, which is not an elimination, it's I can't tell one way or the other. There's a big difference between it's an elimination and it's an inclusion. If that was the case, we would absolutely, now you have something where there truly is a difference of opinion. When one expert or even a group of experts, and not a shock, they all come from one lab, they all learn together, they all, the fact that
This was sent to an outside lab who came to the.
Not my understanding. It was not sent to an
I've
independent
never known
lab.
Kathy Corrado to lie to me, and she said it was sent to an outside lab outside of Onondaga, examined by multiple experts.
Okay, that's news to me. I've never heard that.
Okay.
My understanding was certainly her other firearms experts had a look at it, and they all felt that it was inconclusive. We had not only our original person, but we had a person who verified and looked at it, and that was their opinion. So certainly, I thought it was a good quality measure to go, put your heads together and have a look at this and have a debate and discuss, meet and see if you could come to some kind of resolution. We also had discussed sending it to an independent third examiner as such, because we had done it with that previous large situation with those 50 cases. We paid the state paid a lot of money, and we had 9 cases that came back with exactly those kinds of differences. So with that experience, they go, and when you don't know what the answer is, finding somebody else who says inconclusive or association, it doesn't answer the question because you don't really know what the answer is. Now, if it was absolutely, if somebody was saying it was an exclusion, which was not the case, and an inclusion, that is a difference, that is absolutely one. Now, as it turns out, because of the IG investigation, this was provided to the commission. It was an executive, but we did not, and I agree with you on that, we didn't come forward right at the beginning because we're working through all of that, trying to resolve it, and the person never did return back to analysis.
Okay, now, Ms. Goldthwait of the Innocence Project is going to send a tape recording of your last 5 minutes to every defense lawyer in the state of New York that ballistics evidence and tool mark evidence is a guess. It's not.
That's not what he said.
Well, I just, as I'm not trying to get into an argument with you, Ray, but I just, I'm looking back at my notes. There was nothing turned over to us other than IG is opening an investigation regarding gun examination. 2 labs came to 2 different results. It's actually a lot more than that. And then I've looked through everything. It was never followed up on. Is the Inspector General done with her exam or her investigation?
I do not know what the Inspector General is doing with this.
I mean, I'm sure she would have interviewed you at some point. Have you been interviewed on this matter?
I have not.
Okay.
We did, as the commission, we did invite the IG to come to a commission meeting with no response. So it's not that it just died off and went from there. We did, and there was no communication. But I do just want to take a moment to say one thing before 5 minutes of recording is blasted across New York State FITS, which is that in comparative sciences, you are relying on training and experience. And in this circumstance, there are measures in place where there's technical review or verification. It is not that it is a guess that is based on, that it is.
I did my first gun case in 1981, my first homicide case, and I've done a couple of hundred since then. Okay, I get it, I know that. But I'm telling you that the impression given to this commission was that this lab said A and this lab said something else. Here's the language that was. Had previously been analyzed by another forensic laboratory in the state whose results were not identical to the conclusions reached by our analysts.
Not identical, but not contrary to. It's not identification exclusion, right? On the spectrum of analyses, it is within the realm.
If I may, yeah, because you have more documentation before you that can maybe shed some light. CTS just has before us a firearms proficiency test where you do know what the ground truth is. It's supposed to be an elimination. And so many of the firearms examiners, over a couple hundred that was sent out to, had not identical, because there's a big difference between not getting exactly the same thing and it being a significant deal. When one group of examiners, and so in this case, and you have the paperwork before us, all three of our examiners said something was inconclusive, when in fact the ground truth, because we actually did know, unlike that case, because nobody really knows what the answer is in that case, but where it is a proficiency test, you know what the answer is, and the answer is supposed to be an elimination. But not only did our three examiners agree with each other, but they're doing it independently, so too did a whole bunch of other people taking all of that same proficiency test. So much so that CTS had to say, well, this is hard, essentially, and people can come to differences of opinion. So this is not, as you might, as you're indicating, that this is a, oh my God, you're getting a difference. This is a reasonable thing that occurs from time to time where people have difference of opinion. As we learned, where we sent all of those cases out, where 9 came back with that exact same kind of difference of opinion. Inconclusive is an appropriate exam where people are making judgments, where they just don't feel comfortable making a call. We need that category. And it doesn't mean that somebody is necessarily wrong when they feel through their judgment training experience, they can reach a firmer conclusion. That happens, and it is normal, and we need it to go that way.
You realize, and you're probably more aware than anybody, that defense bar has probably for the last decade attempted to suggest that tool mark identification in gun cases is not conclusive. It's not science. You know that. There have been decisions out of the Southern District of New York where I think Judge Rakoff said the only thing they can say is that bullet may have come from that gun. And that's not my understanding of the science at all. That there should be a vigorous and rigorous review of error rates. I think it's a perfectly legitimate science to be able to say that bullet came from that gun to the exclusion of all others. But that's not where everybody.
We don't say that ever.
I know. I see you grimace, Ray.
Well, because
when I started, that's what the experts said.
Certainly,
and nobody's gotten a new trial.
So, forensic scientists, firearms, and the comparative disciplines, as including all the rest of the disciplines, we're true to the science. And you all in the legal world, that's your deal. You all arguing about it and what's the difference? We have to say, here's what we can do and here's what we can't do. We have to be aware of what the limitations are. And the truth of it is we have human beings who are making decisions based on their judgment training and whatnot. It's not like the benefit of the instrumental analysis who have the beauty of an instrument that is fully reproducible. You have human beings who are using their judgment, looking at a thing and making a call to the best of their capability. We know there's going to be differences. The difference is it a significant difference? When one says it's an exclusion and one says it's an inclusion, that's a big deal. When one says, I can't tell, it's inconclusive, and then someone says, I think I can tell, they reach that independently and they have someone verify it and say, yep, I agree with you, that's gonna happen. And we have to be able to understand it to go, is this something that is a big deal or is it a normal course of business? That's what you do scientifically. It happens just like this proficiency test, and you have the documentation and proof before you and you know what the ground truth is. We don't know what the ground truth is in that case.
Totally agree with everything you just said, with the exception of there was actually 4 independent experts disagree. But let me ask you this question. If you're Jessica Goldthwait and you got John Doe is on trial for murder, and the only evidence the DA has is that he was caught with the murder weapon, and the bullet in the victim's head is traceable back to that weapon that he had on him. Do you think that she would want to know that previously this guy had disagreed in the previous homicide case with 4 other experts? I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying, do you think she would want to know that?
I guess the point we're making is an inconclusive, is that a disagreement or is that a natural difference that you can have? And what we're saying is, look, there's the proficiency test. It's a natural difference that can occur. And so treating it otherwise is not being appropriate with the science. That is where it is.
Well, Ray, let me just reemphasize that I've had a great relationship with you, and I respect the crap out of you, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Listeners.
Dave, I saw you step to the table. Did you want to say anything else?
Well, I was just going to say that one of the things in the complaint, the statement was made that we were deliberately trying to hide this from the commission, which is incorrect.
Not by me.
No, by the complaint.
Oh.
1 week after we were notified by the Onondaga County Lab that we had reanalyzed their cases, was scheduled a quality assurance technical working group meeting at our lab. At that meeting, which was May 1st and 2nd, I brought this issue up during just a general discussion. I said, we just tested a case from another lab, slightly different, inconclusive versus this. One says, I can't tell, we said yes. Discussed it at that meeting. Nobody at that meeting thought it was significant enough that needed to be reported. But what my point also is, several people from the Office of Forensic Services were also at that meeting, including the new director of OFS, who was also a commission member. So if we were trying to hide this from the commission, I certainly would not have brought this up on my own during that meeting. So again, we weren't trying to hide anything. It was discussed. We determined that might not be, and we say it is. That wasn't a significant event that needed reporting. But we were going further with this. We did have plans to further check this analyst's ability. So what we did is we decided to give this person a blind proficiency test. We just so happen to have 2 revolvers of the same make and model as the gun in this case in our reference collection. On July 3rd, at the end of the day, when everybody else had gone, this was on a Friday, everybody had gone home for their 4th of July weekend. Previously to this, I had created a sectional wall, I made it at my house. So sheetrock, studs, insulation, exterior sheathing. Myself and the supervisor in firearms went down into our test fired bullets into this the wall, piece of wall I made. All the shots we took came from one gun, with the exception of one we took from the other gun. We had contacted a previous employee, previous firearms examiner that used to work with us, who now works out of state at a different as a firearms examiner in a different state. We got permission from that lab director that they would be used as a pre-distribution lab. So he was going to look at these bullets, make sure he could tell the difference, and then we're going to issue this as a blind PT. We had it set up with our special investigations units downstate that they were going to submit this evidence as a real case to our Mid-Hudson lab to further distance it, to make it more realistic to our Mid-Hudson lab, and then they were going to relay it up to us for testing. Unfortunately, so what we did was we drove these samples out to Rhode Island for the examiner to take a look at them there, and he told us that it would be better for this person to do the testing first, and then he would look at it afterward, only because he would have to clean the bullets up and all the debris and stuff that were the lands and grooves. The person would obviously know that somebody else had worked on it first. So we tried to make this as realistic as we could. And unfortunately, during this process, this analyst was involved in a car accident and really never came back. So that was, that kind of ended it. And also during—
You should have told us at the beginning of the story. We could have saved a lot of time. I mean, it was a hell of a story.
And also during this, again, we didn't really think that there was a problem with this analyst's ability, because during this process, she also took after the certification exam. So there's nothing on our end that led us to believe.
I totally understand that. I totally agree with you. I've been a champion on this commission of saying let me look at all the disclosures we have, the stress that lab people are under, the proficiency test. We don't have time to solve crimes anymore. I get that. I 100% get that. I just don't want to have to try a case twice because somebody as efficient as my 2 defense colleagues here find out about this after I convict somebody of murder on your analyst testimony, and they say, we want a new trial. The DA didn't disclose it. That's all I'm saying. Just give it to us. Let's see what the Inspector General says.
Okay, so I'll say, in hindsight, we should have reported it, not that we feel like we didn't make an appropriate decision, but
Nobody-
just if
Any,
at all to
any
be
suggestion that
transparent.
you try to cover this up, you don't cover things up by turning them over to the Inspector General, okay? So that's nonsense in the complaint.
Can I just ask for a clarification with respect to the 50 cases, 9 of which came up inconclusive? And I apologize if I missed the explanation, but why was that done? Was that done after this Onondaga New York State Police issue? Was that done
No.
before, separately?
Yeah.
I was a little confused. I apologize.
Yeah, so thank you for the clarification. So part of what happened, that was a totally independent situation where, and I won't go into the details, but as a result of that situation, which had nothing to do with this and was years previous, was in 2012, where we sent out 51 cases to an independent firearms laboratory to re-examine cases. And that was to essentially verify whether, this person was doing things correctly or not. And in that case, 9 cases came back where we had this same inconclusive versus a conclusive kind of difference. So they're not identical, and essentially out of that, there was a determination that had to be made to go, well, is this significant? And so again, that was an IG investigation where it was just as I tried to explain here. Those are the kinds of things that occur when you have different people, judgment, training, different microscopes, different visual acuity. You're going to have, it's an acceptable thing to occur. It occurs. The difference between I can't say, which is inconclusive, versus I feel that I can say, which is a more conclusive. That occurs. And it's just part of what you have an issue with having to explain this very thing.
I mean, certainly thank you for that clarification. So just when you say this individual, you don't necessarily mean, or do you mean it's the same person involved with the Onondaga?
No, I apologize for not being clear.
You're just trying to be anonymous, okay.
Totally previous, a totally different examiner. Turned out there was nothing that was untoward that came out of any of that individual's cases, but we did have that same education with respect to inconclusive versus a more conclusive finding, and essentially was that same learning curve to go, this is an acceptable situation, it occurs. And if you will, 9 out of 51 even gives you a stat if you want to look at it that way.
Well, I mean, it's obvious, of course, the difference between an identification and an inconclusive to the accused, the importance of that, and also the concern that inconclusive findings may be, in fact, masking through exclusions. But thank you for the clarification. What prompted that review back then? Was there a concern with that analyst specifically?
Go ahead.
What happened in that case was a firearms examiner of ours from the past had retired and got brought back to our lab as a consultant. I believe DC just paid his salary to come back to try and work on the backlog of firearms cases. The first case this individual worked on, when he came back to the lab, he made a comment to the effect that the submitting agency had submitted the wrong testifier because it didn't match the testifier that our analyst did at the lab. And he made a comment that he was not going to put that in his notes because he didn't want to hurt the case. So what he wrote in his case was, I think that he didn't examine the item. So the supervisor at the time brought that to the attention of administration, but also told the person, no, you did the test, it has to go in your report. The person was warned a couple times, and then when he finally put his report out for tech review, he did indeed put in his notes that the item was not examined. So based on that, we made the disclosure, I believe it was to the commission, that this person was pretty much falsifying his work. So that's what prompted us to decide that his previous cases, when he actually did work at the lab, those are the cases that we sent out for independent review at that private lab.
I appreciate
And that
that
was,
information. Thank you. Was this
2000
person
yeah,
fired?
just, they,
Well, they were in a contract as a contract employee and they were not allowed back, correct?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
but to give you the years, this was 2012, 2013, and I think the tail end of the investigation might have gone to 2014. So we're talking, there's a number of years of difference. But firearms discipline in terms of that visual examination, while it's advanced tremendously, there's still that human element of doing the actual comparison, making the judgment, making those decisions.
And the Inspector General actually did investigate that incident as well. They did produce a report.
Quick question.
Sure.
So was, I assume it was a Utica jurisdiction, got a copy of a report from Onondaga and a copy from the state police that were conflicting, right? And you had a meeting with Onondaga. That's what I understand based on what I'm hearing. Was there any reanalysis done after this meeting when what the discrepancy was identified?
So again, just, and we could probably go to the farm section head, but just to make sure I'm kind of getting this right. So what happened was the defense attorney was the actual one, because the prosecutor gets the information, sends it to the defense as part of that whole discovery. The defense attorney goes, why am I getting two reports with thing? And this is Brad Brown from our firearms section, or he's now overseeing the trace evidence discipline as well. So the defense attorney actually is the one who provides the notification. And at that point, we recognized we had inadvertently done the re-examination. Right. But then noting also that we had this inconclusive versus conclusive, then we had through communication with Onondaga, well, now, how are we going to pursue this?
Right.
And so essentially it's like, we did provide that so they could have a look at it, essentially look at their system and go, are you sure? Is there anything we can improve? Is it really inconclusive? We're doing the same. Then we actually had the folks get together. It'll talk it out, have a look at it, see if there's anything we can do in terms of improvement. And their folks reached the same conclusion. Our folks stuck with their conclusion. And that's where we had decided, as Dave went to the extreme lengths of working with the out-of-state lab to come up with a blind proficiency test. That was where this examiner also did very well and passed the AFTE exam. So we had a number of things that were just trying to verify, was this person really doing a good job with, was it?
Right, sure. Yeah.
Doing that kind of thing.
So in the end, there was no reanalysis done. There wasn't another report sent out.
We didn't send it out. We did not send it out to another lab, albeit I recognize that's in difference with the information that Commissioner Fitzpatrick has.
So that original report is all that was sent to the
defense. There was no reissue of another report.
Right.
I think the time has come to take a bio break. Thank you, State Police. And before we move on to laboratory disclosures, we'll take a 5-minute bio break. We're going to pause the recording, but leave the stream live on YouTube. Everyone, please mute your microphones. 5 minutes, we'll be back. Thank you. Okay, we're coming back on. I just want to see if you're back, can you put your camera on? And then as soon as I see everyone, I'll have Catherine start again.
They did what they were supposed to do on their end, so you got nothing to do with it. I don't know nothing about that because once it comes over to you, they have to follow your orders.
Exactly. So
Okay.
it's just being submitted to us as a new evidence.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, Lindsay, if you want to. Catherine, you want to go ahead and start us back up again, unpause us, and.
Good to go.
Thank you. We're still streaming and all of that fun stuff. So let's wrap this up as swiftly as possible. However, we are now entering laboratory disclosures, which there are quite a few. Before we move on to them, though, I just want to mention to the members of the commission that the Office of Forensic Services will be introducing a new laboratory disclosure and proficiency test results form. And that's in an effort to streamline the notifications and provide consistent documentation to the members. With the recent change in ANAB and they're disclosing unexpected results of proficiency tests, it can get very muddied by, is it unexpected because they don't do the testing or because there was an issue or whatever. So we wanted to generate something that would be a good summarizer and make things consistent between the labs. So that is to come. We're working with our quality assurance folks on that. So hopefully in meetings to come, this will look slightly different. So we'll first start with the Monroe County Crime Lab. This is an initial notification of an error in the calculation of the lab's trigger pull measurement of uncertainty. The lab has temporarily stopped performing trigger pull measurements, and it's determining what cases have been affected. And of course, this is again just an initial notification. We do have members available to speak if there are any questions for the lab. Do we have any questions? Hearing none. Looking for hands. Okay, Nassau County Office of the Medical Examiner Toxicology Laboratory. The first set of documents is an initial notification of unexpected results in a seized drug proficiency test. The analyst has been removed from performing the method pending resolution of the matter. The laboratory, again, is still investigating the issue. The second set of documents is an update regarding the disposal of post-mortem specimens that was initially presented to the commission. We discussed it back in December 2023. Corrective action has been completed, but the final resolution and closeout of the issue is waiting an additional system improvement. Are there any questions for this lab? We do have someone available virtually. Jessica has a question. Catherine, if you could elevate, I believe, Timothy Hahn, the acting director we have.
Tim, you were made a panelist. If whenever you're ready, you can unmute, and if you have a camera, turn it on.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. Go ahead, Jessica.
Hi, good morning. I understand this review with respect, and I'm speaking with respect to the false positive on the PT test. This investigation is still ongoing. Oh, I think I can't quite hear you. Are you muted or just is it my volume?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, turning up my volume. So apology if I can.
Yes, you are correct. This investigation is still ongoing.
And as part of the investigation, you're doing a reanalysis of all evidentiary items tested by the analyst within a period of November 2022 to January 24. Is that right?
That is correct, and actually that reanalysis has been just completed. And I can inform you that there were no inconsistencies noted between the reanalysis and the original testing that was done.
That was my question. Great. Do you have a better sense, and I understand you're not quite done with this, but do you have any sense about what the root cause of this false positive was? Was it contamination? What happened?
I don't have a definitive answer right now, but it looks like it potentially may have been a contamination somewhere within the process. We have ruled out certain sources of that contamination, being like solvents that might have been used. But like I said, we're still looking into what other factors or items may have been in play that might have been contaminated. But right now, I do not have a definitive source of that contamination.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Still.
Yes, Lydia, go ahead.
Good morning, Tim. In general, are analysts given their own samples, or do they take aliquots from a shared sample?
No, with this proficiency, this is an individual proficiency, so they are all provided a separate set of proficiency samples to test. And as noted,
for this particular,
I'm sorry, I was
I'm
going to
sorry,
say,
go
as
ahead.
noted within this survey, there were 2 other participants in the lab that participated in this survey using their own set of samples, and they obtained the correct result for both samples within the survey.
Thank you. The analyst that worked, or this particular analyst, if I'm correct, they've worked on 8 cases. Is that low for this particular analyst?
No, I think that's par for the course for the analyst. The scene item or evidentiary testing that we do is not a high volume assay in terms of it is not routine with every case. So it is, routinely performed but sporadic throughout the year and really based upon specific findings in each case. So doing 8 cases is a normal amount.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you, Tim.
All right, thank you.
We'll move on now to the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology. The first item is related to a case reporting and technical review issue that was previously presented to the Commission during the December of 2023 meeting. The New York City Council has been notified and the laboratory has submitted the root cause analysis report. The second item is the disclosure of an update to the lab's procedure and reporting language for the male screening test. Standard operating procedures and reporting language have been updated to make it clear that the results of this screening are presumptive. We do have members available virtually for any questions. I will also make note that this is related just to the laboratory disclosure documents that we have in front of us. Any questions? Okay, moving on. We have the New York, I'm sorry, what? Oh, Jessica, sorry. I guess we need a sound or something, not just the hand raised.
Sorry about that. Yes, I do have some questions.
Okay, Catherine, if you could elevate the representatives from the OCME.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Tim, if you could really quick, Jessica, Tim, if you could really quick, just let us know who's in the room with you. That would be helpful.
Sure. Our General Counsel, Martha Savio, Deputy Director Craig O'Connor, myself, Tim Cooperschmidt, Technical Leader Tiffany Vasquez, and Quality Manager Kira McKay. And
Thank you.
Meredith,
Go ahead,
Meredith
Jessica.
Rosenberg, Deputy Director, is on remotely in another location.
Thank you.
Thank you. And good morning again. So we received as part of our materials the root cause analysis that was also provided under local legislation to the City Council. I had some questions about the causes and contributing factors that were outlined in the RCA, but I guess I just want to hear from you. What was the root cause for what essentially was, lying on reports, and this supervisor doing the work and having the other analysts sign off as they had? What is the root cause for this? Are you still figuring it out?
Well, the one thing I would like to say is the event is described as a violation of SOPs, a violation of the procedures for technical review and reporting. The RCA committee, we met and you read the report. I don't know if the ultimate root cause can be determined. We were not able to speak with the individual. So the focus of the committee was to make recommendations to prevent this from happening again, and to look at what procedures were in place and to see what can be improved upon.
With respect to, and this is on page 3 of 9 of the root cause analysis report, just for reference. But as part of your investigation into the causes and contributing factors, you did a comparison of attrition rate between your agency and then general city agencies. And I think you concluded that the attrition rate for OCME was a little actually under that for other overall New York State government employees. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, one thing, and maybe this is off, but OCME is the only game in town with respect to New York City, whereas other city agencies might have more of an ability, and this is just, I don't have data to back up what I'm saying, but I'm just a little concerned that maybe this is a little misleading simply because OCME does do all the forensic DNA testing in the city. I know there are nearby labs, but it is the only game in town for New York City. So I'm not sure a direct one-to-one comparison, even if I understand there's some value in doing it, but may not be as informative perhaps given that circumstance. Does that make sense? Was that something you considered in sort of looking at the discrepancy in the attrition rates?
I wasn't on the committee. The committee was headed by our quality director, Lou Vargas. So I can't speak to that.
Is Lou Vargas there, or sorry, I'm looking in.
No, he's not available.
Okay. I also see this is the bottom paragraph of page 3 of 9 of the root cause analysis, that the committee, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Vargas, but reviewed nonconformity data for trends that suggested that while staff was meeting productivity goals, but the work did have an increasing number of errors. Can you explain what data supports that observation and what you mean by increasing number of errors?
Well, what Mr. Vargas looked at were the number of non-conforming events that we had reported for the years 2020, 2021, and 2022. And these were essentially the charts that we send to DCJS of the listing our non-conformities. And there was an increase in 2021 compared to 2020, and then slightly more in 2022. However, two factors to look at. One was that 2020 was COVID, so there was less work done. And in 2021, we implemented a new platform for DNA analysis, and we were seeing an increase in contamination events. And anytime a control fails with contamination, that's a nonconformity. So that was basically the cause for the increase.
I understand.
Yeah, but we're always hiring new staff, and generally when new trainees come in, there might be more errors. But when we looked at the data, the increase was really only in the contamination events. What?
Sorry, was there something you wanted to add, or?
No.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yes. But just how can you tell? Is it you may have sort of included this in your answer, but how do you tell if the contamination is due to the increased sensitivity versus analyst error?
It was an observation based on the type of contamination. So we were talking about one allele being seen in a control, as opposed to, you know, multiple alleles that can possibly be attributed to an analyst, or we would look to see, could those alleles be attributed to another case in the batch? So with the increased sensitivity of instrumentation, we were seeing only a single allele show up repeatedly, and that was something different from the previous platform, where we would we had much less of that, and it wasn't isolated to a particular analyst. It was just more widespread, so that's why we concluded it was the instrumentation and not an analyst or people-specific issue.
Drawing your attention to page 6 under recommendations, I just wanted clarification of a phrase that you used under number 1. The recommendations say that lab managers should explore the development of a LIMS-based fix that prevents a tech reviewer from selecting a case in which they authored examination records or drafted the case report. Can you just explain what you mean by examination records?
And an examination record is a case record that is taken like contemporaneously with the work that's being done. So it's kind of like, if I'm looking at an item of evidence and I'm taking notes on that, that's an examination record. If we're doing, you know, part of the DNA process and we're documenting what was done, that's an examination record. And yeah, that basically summarizes it.
And those are all kept within our LIMS system.
Wait, so it's running StarMix considered an examination record, or is that not considered an examination record?
No, we consider running StarMix a supplemental record.
Okay. And do you know, in that set of 31 cases, and I apologize if I missed it, but for those cases in which criminalist 1, say, actually did all the work and authored the case report, even though the other 2 signed off on it, was that criminalist also running StarMix as part of their actually doing the work?
For some of them, yes, they were running StarMix. But the main violation was that they were authoring the case report, which was the examination record, and then doing the technical review.
Who is running StarMix in the other ones? Right, you said for some cases, the person who was actually...
For some of the cases, sorry, I was speaking over you. Some of the cases had the StarMix performed by the criminalist who signed the report. But for all of those 31, the criminalist who signed the report did not author the report.
Right, okay. And for number 2, top of page 7 of 9 of the RCA, I just wanted to ask about the status. One of the recommendations was that management should implement an audit of the tech review process and actually sample beyond these 3 individuals. Has that happened? Is IT still working on the query? If it has happened, have you discovered anything? If it hasn't happened, when do you think it will?
So IT did complete the query, and it is a pretty complicated query. It's not a simple, did this happen before, yes or no? And we are still going, in that it's not a simple query, we're still going through the data and evaluating. It involves going into particular cases and looking at the audit trails. But it was definitely a way to filter down the hundreds of thousands of records that we had to go through. Right. And we're looking at all technical reviewers who worked for our department, even those who have departed, who have left.
And I suppose based on those findings, depending on what they show, will the laboratory consider additional corrective actions or root cause analyses if necessary?
Yes, depending on what we find, yes, definitely.
Is there any other investigation that's being done besides the additional query that I've neglected to ask?
I mean, part of the initial investigation plan was to do a quality review into the casework of these analysts, to do our own review, looking at 10% of the cases written by the 2 criminalists and technically reviewed by the other criminalists. Not obviously the 31 cases, because those were already rewritten and distributed, but looking at all the other scope of cases to ensure that the issue was isolated to this procedural violation. And so that investigation is done. We completed that review and all the results were technically correct and verified.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on now to the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Toxicology. The first set of documents is initial notification and closeout of an unexpected proficiency test result. A compound was missed by an analyst who processed analytical data, and the error was not caught by the batch approval manager or technical reviewer. The laboratory has investigated the issue, reviewed past work, and found no other casework to be affected. The lab considers this matter to be closed. The second item is an initial notification of an incorrect specimen aliquoted during supplemental testing. The lab corrected the reports and has implemented staff witnessing of the aliquoting step. The lab is still in the process of reviewing batches associated with the investigation. We do have someone available virtually from the lab if there are any questions. Do we have any questions? Okay, Catherine, if you could elevate Gail Cooper, the lab director, I believe, is on the line.
Gail, you are made a panelist. Whenever you're ready, you could turn on your video and mic if available.
Okay.
Thank you, Gail. Go ahead, Lydia.
Good morning. Hi, Gail. It's Lydia.
Hi.
For the first reported finding for the norbuprenorphine, are there other results from a analytical run that could also end up being off scale that could be mixed up with an actual analyte? And is that the reason why this was missed?
So the reason this one was missed, there's only a small number, I think it's 15 analytes over the hundreds of drugs and metabolites that we test that don't give a linear response on the instrument. And so because of that, if there's a very high concentration, it doesn't give a number. And this is just a software issue with those types of analytes. And we're aware of that. It's not something that's new. So in this situation, yes, when you get very large concentrations, it can shift and not be in the window. But it was in the window in this particular case. We just missed it. And thankfully, with all of the cases, we reviewed every batch that had been completed with these analytes, and there were no missed occasions in any of the casework.
But what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you could actually see this peak. It's just that it didn't have a value associated with it, right?
That's right, yes.
So what is the usual response? Because there was reported that there were 2 other high concentration analytes that were found and dealt with, but this one wasn't, or 2 other analysts had the same situation and they identified it properly. So what would cause you to say, oh, here's something that's off scale and it's not labeled, I need to go and do more work?
I mean, it was just simply an omission. I mean, ultimately, we're reviewing hundreds and hundreds of peaks every time we look at a batch. And on this occasion, it was missed, but within the same batches that were done for this proficiency testing, we identified where that was the case. So there's no other explanation other than that we are just looking at so much data in one go, and it's possible that you're going to miss something in a situation like this where it's not been flagged. And usually, right, we have all these like steps in place to try and catch any errors that could happen. There was three individual steps that we follow: the processor, the batch approver, the technical reviewer, and on all three occasions it was missed. And that's clearly not common, because we, as I say, have reviewed all of the previous batches and there was not a single occasion where that happened.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a couple quick ones. So the same explanation applies to the technical reviewer, that they were just looking at a lot of peaks and just missed it, as
Yes.
applies to the, okay.
Yes.
I saw for Commissioners page 181, and this, for your benefit, this is the nonconformity report. There was a question toward the middle there that says, does the customer need to be notified? And it's checked no, I believe. Can you just explain that? I mean, I understand it's a proficiency test, not a case report, but it does need, you know, a failing proficiency test is discoverable information. So
Yes. So absolutely good point. We have provided the disclosure as part of the discovery for the individual analysts involved. So yeah, that wasn't clear. You're right. From that paperwork. Yeah, but that was disclosed.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Gail. We can move on now to the New York City Police Department latent print section. The lab has submitted a closeout letter regarding the potential Brady, now here's the debate, Giglio or Giglio issue that was initially discussed at the September 2023 commission meeting. As a reminder, this happened prior to NAB and New York State accreditation. They've submitted the documentation that closes it out. Are there any questions for the lab? We do have some folks available virtually. Okay, next up is the New York City Police Department Police Laboratory.
Oh, wait,
there are
sorry,
several
I said
issues.
Yes. Sorry, I must have been on mute. Sorry about that.
You know, I knew that didn't quite feel right, Jessica. I knew that didn't feel right.
I
thought you were sleeping.
I thought you were giving me a reprieve just for a hot minute. Thank you. All right, so we've got Jennifer Lady, and I think Rosalind Joseph is on as well. You've been elevated. I think you can unmute and turn your, there we go. Thank you. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you so much. Good morning. So I understand you submitted a closeout letter to us, but I just have a few remaining questions here. Is the report that you had submitted, I think actually for the September commission meeting from Amanda Katranakis, it's marked interim or pending. There's some indication that it's actually not a final report. Is that the only one you had, or do you have something that was final? Because there were some indications of, I think in red, that there was data that was going to be collected but hadn't been, and I just want to make sure I didn't actually miss that.
You didn't miss it. The one that we gave you is the only one that we found.
Okay. Do you, for those parts of the interim Katranakis report, do you have that data?
The ones that were in red?
Yeah.
No, we don't have anything related to the red items.
Okay. And I think we discussed this a little bit at the last meeting, but I was asking about inconclusive determinations. Have you compiled a list of the inconclusive determinations for the 3 detectives involved? I suppose for the one, it would be pre-2015, but for the others, until retirement.
No, but I actually, you might be able to answer this better. I'm not even sure that we were using the terminology inclusive until much later after they had retired.
So it was either identification or not identification, or what was there?
Yeah, identification or exclusion.
And I mean, my final question, and again, we've discussed this at length over the last couple of meetings, but have you considered, I understand that you had members of the latent print unit perform this review, but have you considered reaching out to independent reviewers to do a selection of review everything? And can you just walk me through your thought process about, if not, why not?
No, we haven't considered it. We need to rely upon our own examiners to do the work that we do, not upon external people. We have had multiple examiners look at these cases and conferred on all of their conclusions, and we are satisfied with that. We, of course, have no objection if anybody would like to have examination quality documents of the evidence and send them out on their own. And we have actually done that with multiple defense attorneys have asked for that, and they can have them.
Reanalysis done by examiners within your latent print unit. Is it fair to say it wasn't blinded in any way? They knew what they were reviewing?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. We'll move on now to the New York City Police Department Police Laboratory. We have several matters. I'm just going to go through each of them, and then we can ask collectively for questions as a whole. And if you just refer to which matter you're referring to, that would be helpful. The first notification is of a seized drug performance monitoring test issue. 3 performance monitoring tests were assigned in which the expected result was not attained. All analysts followed the procedure, and the test was evaluated as successful. The second issue is the initial notification and closeout of a report that was issued with an incorrect weight unit. An amended report was issued with the district attorney's and the district attorney's office was notified. The laboratory gave a presentation to all seized drug analysts on the purpose and importance of the review checklist and the verbal check of reports. The third issue is the initial notification and closeout of the latent print evidence that was lost by the crime scene unit during the transfer to the latent print lab. The laboratory performed an exhaustive search but was unable to locate the latent print lifts and notified the district attorney's office. After investigation, the laboratory has implemented a written procedure for carrying evidence and has a dedicated bag for transporting tape lifts. The next issue is the initial notification of possible chemical interactions occurring. The laboratory has made policy changes in the identification of controlled substances in specific conditions. A significant number of cases have been reviewed, and the laboratory will provide an update once more information is gathered. The next set of documents is the closeout of an issue originally discussed at the June 2023 meeting regarding a chemical reaction occurring in some bottles of solvent that are converting controlled substances to non-controlled substances. The laboratory reviewed cases and notified customers. The lab will test all new batches of chloroform before they are put into use and weekly to ensure that they are still usable. The final issue was first reported back in April of 2023 in regard to an unexpected result on a gunshot residue proficiency test. At the time of the initial notification, the laboratory was too early on in their investigation to determine if it was a significant event, and the notification was therefore placed on their annual laboratory summary, but not seen by the commission for review. A closeout letter was submitted by the laboratory in February of 2024. The laboratory investigated the issue, reviewed past casework, and found no cases to be affected. They've updated procedures for labeling items, and the analyst has successfully completed an additional proficiency test. We do have representatives from the lab available virtually. Are there any questions for the lab? Hearing none. Oh, wait, I see a hand. I was waiting for Jessica again because I didn't know. So if we can elevate the members from the lab who are present virtually, I think it's Stephanie O'Shea and Scott O'Neill. I'm not sure if they're together.
Hey, good morning. I have a few people with me. I'll just make very brief introductions. Myself, Scott O'Neill, the lab director, Stephanie O'Shea, the quality assurance manager, Assistant Director Nicole Capitali of the drug section, Assistant Director Lisa Ray Burke from the drug section, Assistant Director Mary Yang from the chronologistic section, and Executive Director Neil Fenton from the NYPD Legal Bureau.
Excellent, thank you. Stephen, go ahead. I believe you're muted. I hope you're muted, or else we're having issues.
Yeah, my apologies with this. It's like the
okay, good.
The new slang saying you're on mute. With respect to the use of the chloroform, that was a methodology that had already been validated at the lab, correct?
Correct.
Any concerns about other validated solvents, use of any other solvents, or any determination as to why a validated method had gone awry?
I think it was more about what was in that particular chloroform that was provided by that vendor, that chemical reaction we were not aware of. But I don't think there's any concern about any other methods. It was just merely that this is new information that came to us. And until we decide on a new solvent, which we may do, that's something we're considering. We may choose to use a different solvent, and of course we'll be validating that method before implementation and taking into consideration what we now know, that there may be other ingredients in that solvent that we have to be concerned about, not just the actual main component, but any additives.
Okay, so validating the next method using a solvent, you'll look at each of the components of that. What about the vendor itself? Any issues with respect to the vendor?
No, but the actual issue is we're seeing it's happening with different vendors as well, and there's actually these additives are having a different effect for different circumstances. So right now we feel that we can move forward and that we're monitoring the system effectively, but we are going to be looking at hopefully using a different solvent in the future and taking into consideration, like I said, what we now know.
Thank you so much. I don't have any other questions.
Any other questions?
Yes. Good morning. Commissioners, this is page 200. What I'm looking at is the February 22nd, 2024 letter notifying a final closeout of the corrective action where pure weight cocaine was reported in grams rather than milligrams. As part of your cause analysis, I see that you noted that the laboratory does use a checklist as part of the review, as well as a verbal checklist, so a written checklist and a verbal checklist. I would have been interested to actually see the checklist. I'm sorry if I missed it. But can you just explain what it means to say that those checklists weren't being used as intended? I think I have a sense of what you mean, but could you just explain it?
Sure. I'm just going to one of the assistant directors of the drug section to speak to it.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Those things.
you can hear me. So those checklists, you're correct. They are checklists that are completed with every case that we do in the drug section. They're hyper-focused checklists that are expected to be part of like a second review process. They are focused on important areas of the report, like identification, weight, and then the gram milligram, which was missed in this one particular case.
As far as this case, all of those checklists were performed. If they just didn't work as intended for catching this mistake, the gram versus milligram, we believe what happened is that the analysts had inattentional blindness based on the consistency of the reports that they were producing, that they were reviewing. So when they were doing these checklists, they were performing them correctly. It's just that they missed the fact that there was grams listed on the report instead of milligrams listed.
So sort of just going through the checklist, like check, 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 without actually seeing the grams versus milligrams discrepancy. Okay. I may have one more question.
We put a
Just
timer
be
on
clear,
here,
and sorry, oh, I'm sorry, am I interrupting someone?
No, I was just saying, should I put a timer on if you needed it? Go ahead.
On the February 22nd letter concerning the initial notification about chemical interactions, I understand that you'll provide an update, but just to be clear, that's different. Is this related to the making the fentanyl analog issue that we talked about in the past, or is it related to that?
It's different. It's different. The fentanyl analog in the past was to do with the chloroform. This is not pertaining to the chloroform.
Okay. Okay. And you'll provide an update for the next meeting?
Yes, this was just initial notification.
Okay. The last question I had concerned the mislabeling issue on, I believe it was the Trace PT, if I'm not mistaken, page 218 for the commission members. You did, as part of your investigation, go back to actual casework, and you looked at the images for actual casework, and you concluded that when looking at the images, it was clear which items were a sample stub and which were the environmental controls, so there wasn't this issue of mislabeling. And you concluded there was no indications that the scenario that occurred during the PT test would have happened during casework. Can you just explain that a little more? Why was that your conclusion?
Sure. I'm just going to have Assistant Director Mary Yang explain it, if you don't mind.
Hi. In normal casework, when they're creating stubs from clothing, they do generate an environmental control, and the environmental control is started off by testing the paper on which the evidence is laid out. So there will be paper fibers on the stub. So that makes it very easy to differentiate it from stubs created from clothing. In this particular case, in the efficiency test, they did not receive an environmental control. They received a negative control, which would have been created by stuffing the hands of the person collecting the samples from the possible shooters. So that stub was much cleaner. So it was not obvious. There was no obvious visual difference between that negative control and the stubs created from the potential shooter's hand. So we believe that sort of helped create this confusion in casework. Those papers, fibers on the environmental controls, it's very obvious that they
All right, thank you. We'll move on then to the New York State Police Crime Laboratory. The first set of documents is an initial notification and closeout of a false negative screen in toxicology. The laboratory has investigated the issue and found it was specific to a single drug or drug class and just to one case. The lab has implemented a flag for future screening runs to require additional review for potential outlier results. The second set of documents is the initial notification of unexpected results on a seized drug proficiency test. The analyst's work has been halted and the lab is performing an investigation. They will provide an update when additional information is available. The third set of documents is a closeout of an issue originally discussed at the December 2023 meeting. An analyst incorrectly entered the shape of a firing pin impression into the integrated ballistic imaging system. The lab reviewed a significant number of cases and identified 3 additional errors. The correction of these errors did not lead to the development of any additional unconfirmed leads. The lab provided training to all firearms analysts in data transfers and updated the technical review worksheet and related instructions. And the last set of documents is the notification of an unexpected result on the firearms proficiency test. Do we have any questions for the lab? Again, we have representatives here in Albany to answer. So we have a question from DA Fitzpatrick. Raise.
In your letter of January 11th, and I'm on page 232 for the other commissioners.
January 11th.
You probably won't need to refer to it, but I just want to quote this. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms regulations prevent the direct transfer of data between IBIS, NIBIN, and our laboratory system, LIMS.
Yeah.
As a result, NIBIN casework requires, on average, over 50 manual data transfers per item. How much time does that cost you?
A lot, but I'd like to describe, because we're debating why that is, right? Just on the ride over. When you have a huge database, there's got to be integrity. If you appreciate, they don't allow other computer programs to link up to that. And you consider it's the integrity of the main database. So that if you've got a potential, like the only way to not have hackers break in is not to have a link. But what that does is, and that's the trade-off. Now you have people manually having to insert it into set fields, which now you have that potential for error, versus you have data integrity where you don't have the computer hackers and that sort of vulnerability. So Brad can probably describe that a little more accurately.
I mean, so you think, despite the additional work that you have to do, you think this is a good thing?
I think it's a reasonable measure, because when you consider how important is the data integrity of that database, critical, right? But part of the overhead is, if you're not going to link computer programs, now you have manual entry. But it's a vulnerability both ways. So you just have a system of trade-offs.
Okay, it just seems to me there ought to be some way, some smart computer person ought to be able to.
Right, they just, ATF will not allow the transfer of data. They won't allow us to. We need to get permission to change the battery in a mouse.
So even if the security the concerns that Ray raised were eliminated, ATF would still not allow access?
I can't speak for ATF, so,
yeah.
But at this time, they're not allowing access.
Okay. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Commissioner, maybe that's something you and I can look into later, huh? Sounds like.
I mean, it's data.
We are trying to operate within the
you get a smart
time
person,
frames
you
of the
get to
minimum
save.
required operating system. So that's one of the issues that we're fighting, is all this data transfer, which is also a risk of a quality event, as we see here.
Thanks.
The data transfer.
If I could add it, it's Pat Tofflino. So CODIS allows for the transfer of information from the laboratory to their network, understanding that there's security that's set up. The fingerprint database and NIBIN don't allow it, but it would be nice if we could.
Well, I guess part of the challenge then is somebody in the beginning somewhere has to create a data set to bring it in. And so with DNA, you have the advantages coming through instrumentation. But when you're doing it in firearms, it's somebody's got to set up that data, the first set of data to then put in. And often it's the NIBIN folks that are, that have to. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Looking for hands. We're good. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go on to the Niagara County Sheriff's Office Forensic Laboratory. This is a closeout of a proficiency test issue that was first identified in January of 2023. The quantitation results for fluoxetine and MDA were outside of the acceptable range. The laboratory has determined that there were multiple factors that may have caused the unexpected results and has implemented corrective actions. Again, we have them available virtually. Do we have any questions for the lab? Okay, Catherine, can you please elevate Christine and Kevin? All right. Lydia, I saw you first out of my periphery, so.
Okay. Hi, Christine and Kevin. Question regarding, let me see if I can find this. You described in your report, as explained in Disposition of Toxic Drugs and Chemicals in Man, 11th edition, by Randall Baselt, patients regularly taking this drug have an average steady state therapeutic value in the range of 25 to 473 nanograms per milliliter. Both 147 and 212 nanograms per ml are within this range. Additionally, the decedent had 239 micrograms per ml of gabapentin, 0.112 micrograms per ml of parent cocaine, and many benzodiazepines. For these reasons, the 44% deviation of the reported fluoxetine level would not have any effect on the cause of death, so no amended report was issued. So that piece of your statement is what I'm concerned with. Was this mentioned to the medical examiner or discussed with the medical examiner, this analysis from the explanation in the book? It's like, well, because I read this in the book, Dr. So-and-so, we're not going to, here's what happened, but we're not going to give you an amended report, or did they want an amended report? Did you offer an amended report?
Yes, thank you for the question, Lydia. At the time, when my section supervisor filled this out, she did not reach out to the medical examiner. We have since reached out to her, issued an amended report, and sent it to her. She did basically state she only wanted it to keep her own records corrected, that it did not impact any of the results that she had for cause of death.
Had you been involved with this initial decision of the not needing to issue an amended report just based on the book, the information from the book?
I was not at the time when she was doing this when she was doing this investigation, and for having very little direction, she did an excellent job in her approach. This was in April of last year, and I was a little bit busy with some things that were coming down with the laboratory due to other considerations, so I did not have time to address it until much later. And then essentially when I reviewed it in June, I didn't go against what she had already done, because then a couple of months, you know, had I been involved in the beginning, I would have issued an amended report. That's why we did actually reach back out upon completion of the entire investigation and ask if they wished to have an amended report. We just asked the doctor, do you want one? And she said yes. For her record, she would like one. So we issued it.
Okay, thank you.
Mike.
Hi, it's Mike Marciano. I'd have to just make a comment on page 243, the conclusion number 1. Analysts feel stressed working on toxicology, PT drug samples, et cetera, et cetera. I guess in seeing this, and this being commented on based on a PT, given some of the other items we've been dealing with over the last year and a half, this concerns me, I would say, because your lab is short-staffed. Is there any way to deal with this? Because you even say it's anticipated to get worse. And this is for PTs and not even casework. I have concern there and want to know what your plans are to address this so this does not bleed over into casework.
I totally understand your concern, sir. At the time, my analysts felt very, very compelled to complete the entire analysis by that due date. I've since basically counseled them that we will handle it exactly like we do regular casework. We just don't report the results until they're completely done. If that deadline comes past, we just report what we have already performed up to that point, and we continue the analysis even after we submit the results so that we can evaluate any work that is done post and compare it to the results once we get it back.
Can I jump in though? Christine, if you're missing the deadline, doesn't that mean that you're going to have to issue a new proficiency test?
Someone
No,
correct me if I'm wrong here.
So this doesn't happen all the time. We do not consider it a failed proficiency test. We would consider it an incomplete proficiency test, but they do actually complete they definitely complete 2 additional CAP PTs throughout the year. They also do blood alcohol PTs. So they do meet their PT requirements.
You did, not to cut you off, you did mention that you do run a lot of proficiency tests.
Yes.
Now, what is the requirement for an analyst in toxicology? How many PTs are they supposed to take a year?
Per ISO requirements and ANEB requirements, the discipline is only required to take 1 PT a year. External PT.
So following on that, is it possible that part of the stress the analysts are feeling is that and I think you earlier this morning, you explained that because you have so many different analytes, you feel that it's prudent to do more PTs than is required to make sure that you're covered, or words to that effect. But if that's resulting in analysts feeling stressed, then maybe it's not called for to do all of these extra PTs if the outcome is in fact that they can't meet the deadline. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I genuinely appreciate that feedback, and we actually have had that discussion a couple of times internally. Some of the issue was the fact that we had our instrument break, and so we actually ran out of time. So if we, there's risk associated with either course of action, and so we are always evaluating that risk and determining what the best course of action is. I think that I do everything I can to take as much pressure off of them, and we just figure it out as we go. We work on our to make sure that when a PT comes in, that they work it alongside their casework, and we report what we have when that deadline comes due. Most of the time they make that deadline. It just so happens on occasion, because of instrumental issues, they have not. But we will continue to evaluate that.
Last year, CAP 2023B was completed in its entirety, so the lab did meet its proficiency requirement. The other 2 had several analytes that weren't able to be reported before the deadline, but all of the reported results were correct. We just followed up with an internal check on that after we received that work and graded it as if that section was part of an internal work as opposed to the external where we got the official grade. So there were no inconsistencies. It was just it was treated a little differently.
Anything else? Mike, do you? No. Okay, thank you.
Thank
We'll move on to the Onondaga County Center for Forensic Sciences Laboratory. The first issue is an initial notification of an unexpected result on an ignitable liquids proficiency test. The lab is investigating the issue and will provide an update when additional information is available. The second issue is an initial notification of an analyst not recognizing and/or preserving friction ridge detail. The district attorney's office has been notified. After a review of cases, one additional case was found to be affected, and the lab is continuing its investigation and will provide an update. The third issue is the notification of an unexpected result on a digital evidence proficiency test. The lab determined that the issue would not have had an impact on casework, as that type of work in the proficiency test is not typically conducted by the examiners in casework. And the last issue is a notification of an unexpected result from the 2023 DNA proficiency test. These results relate to certain aspects of testing that the analysts did not perform and therefore did not report results for. The lab was unaware at the time that this should have been reported to ANAB and then in conjunction with the commission. Do we have any questions for the laboratory? There are representatives available virtually.
I have a question.
Okay, Catherine, if you could elevate Renee, I believe she may be the only one. Renee, you're able to unmute and turn your camera on?
Hi, good morning.
Thank
Afternoon
you.
now, actually.
Yeah, rub it in, afternoon. Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
Good afternoon, Renee. Thanks for pointing that out. I just have a question, and I guess I was a little confused. This is regarding the ignitable liquid proficiency, and in your email to your accreditation manager, you mentioned that you performed serial dilutions, retested the original half of the carbon strip, pattern showed to be MPD, then you tested the half of the carbon strip that was preserved from the first time, and the pattern showed to be the naphthenic paraffinic, the NPP. Can you just help me understand the serial dilution part and the differences you're seeing in the halves of the strips?
Sure.
All right now.
Wow.
You good over there?
We're good.
So we received the results from our proficiency test provider, and we evaluated the summary data that was provided by the provider to see if we could glean any insight from all of the responses provided by the test takers first. So during that process, we evaluated temperature, duration, and the solvent that was used. That information wasn't really helpful in the sense that it didn't give us any indication as to why we observed a NPP, whereas the majority observed an NPD. So we decided to do a second extraction to repeat the process from the first extraction of the sample in question. The resulting chromatogram looked different, and that is why we decided to go and try to investigate and figure out why is it different, because we did the exact same thing on the exact same sample, just spread, at different periods of time. So that's what got us thinking about the serial dilution. It's like, well, if it's not the solvent, if it's not the time duration, if it's not the temperature, but what could have been an affecting factor? So we did the dilution. That dilution chromatograms showed us MPDs, which made us thinking whether or not it could have had any effect on, how to word this, whether or not the first re-extraction was impacted, the result impacted because of the lengthened time since the first extraction. So we went back and we tested the second half of the strip, the original strip, And we saw an MPD also. And that's the same strip. Then we went back and tested the half of the strip that was preserved from the very beginning. So when we first opened the sample, we preserved a half of the strip from the very beginning in a vial, and that vial was not opened. Unlike the other strip that was, we were doing multiple tests, we were doing serial dilutions, so the container was being opened, exposed to the environment, etc. And so there was evaporation that was occurring. So going back to the sample that was initially preserved from the very beginning in a sealed container that was not opened, when we resampled and retested that one, that sample showed an NPP. So that led us, all that information put together indicated to us that it had to do with how concentrated the sample was at the time that we did the first extraction, and we did not dilute, which is why the first extraction showed an NPP and the subsequent ones showed an MPD. That makes sense?
Yes, I think it does. So you're saying when when you're talking about the preserved, you're talking about the archive strip, the half that had underwent no testing. So you put them in the oven overnight, yes. You take them out, you cut the strip in half, you archive half, which is the part that you're talking about. You got an NPP and then.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
The archive half was not tested, was not extracted, nothing was done to it beyond that, the archiving process.
Right, okay, that makes sense. So the archive strip, you got the NPP, then you diluted it, and you got MPD.
And then we got the MPD.
So you believe that the strips came to you too concentrated, and the procedure
yes.
that you have in place wasn't able to get the expected result because of the concentration on the strip?
Yes, we believe that the sample came to us really concentrated. Our process, our SOP, we followed it exactly. We follow our SOP, and the resulting chromatogram was an MPP, and that was our interpretation.
Okay. Do you have any concern about casework that may have very concentrated strips?
Generally speaking, our fire debris casework is, from a volume perspective, is not really high, but we do run controls with it. So when we have fire debris samples being submitted to us, we have the evidentiary sample, and then we also have the submitting agency provide us with a control sample from the scene as well. So both of those items are tested together, and at this time, we don't have any concerns over the casework that has already been performed and the interpretation of the data and what was reported.
Okay. So much like casework, you would get a control sample from a scene, right? Some agencies
Correct.
Are better than
yes.
others, but they'll give you control samples of the matrix that they're submitting
yes.
their sample with. Okay.
Yeah, so
all
we
right.
do have that
I guess I was,
comparison.
right. Okay. So I guess I was just concerned or wondering if you had given any consideration to reviewing any casework where maybe you've identified an NPP. Is it possible that due to the concentration, it would actually change if you do
it's
dilutions?
Possible.
Because dilutions, I assume, are not part of your SOP.
They will be.
Fair.
So we're not fully finished our investigation into the entire matter yet. Like a lot of what I've just presented here has been what's ongoing. And based off of the data and the information that we have right now, we have concluded that at least going forwards, what we are going to do is if we detect an NPP, then we will definitely take a look and the sample concentration into considerations, and dilution may be necessary in order to truly determine NPP versus MPD. The investigation is not fully completed yet, so the consideration of whether or not we are going to need to review casework that has already been released is still on the table and can still be discussed.
Great. I appreciate you passing this along because I think this would be important for all of the labs that do fire debris to understand in amongst the Twig group. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure they will have discussions about this moving forward. So thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, we can move on then. Thank you, Renee. To the.
Bye, Renee.
We can move on then to the Suffolk County Office of Chief Medical Examiner Toxicology Lab. This is a closeout of an issue where a not detected report was amended after additional testing. The laboratory evaluated its limit of detection capability and made a protocol change. They consider the nonconformity to be closed. Do we have any questions for the lab? We have folks available virtually.
Yes.
Catherine, if you could elevate Ed and Michael. Okay, Ed and Mike, you can unmute yourselves and turn your cameras on. There we go. Okay, go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand a couple of things. The first process that was used was LCMS and the second was also LCMS. The only difference was that you changed your acquisition parameters the second time. Would that be fair?
Correct. It was a different acquisition method.
And do you know what the quantity was that was reported back the second time? The first, I believe, was below cutoffs. Do you know what the second one was?
No, because this was a urine sample that we do not quantitate.
I know that, but your SOPs say that you don't report back unless it's above cutoffs. And the first one was reported as negative because the quantity wasn't above the cutoff. So the quantity is relevant for that determination, right?
Correct, and that's why we have the control material was added to make a better evaluation of that. In the past, it was done historically based upon the ion ratios.
And do your standard operating procedures, well, let me say this, the second method that you use is your secondary method, right? That's not your primary.
A secondary analysis method, yes.
Right. And do your SOPs call for that?
It has it in our SOP that it's there available for use, yes.
In what situation?
If we feel that there was something else that you should be looking for if requested by the customer.
The last thing is, was it reported back to the stakeholders that the first test was negative because it was below minimum cutoffs? Was that reported back?
Well, we put the amended report out to them, but it just says that it was analyzed after their request and gives them the result. It doesn't say anything about the previous analysis.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe you could just let me know if you thought about this. In the DUI drugs case, it's not like a per se alcohol case. It's got to be impaired by, right? So quantification sometimes can be extremely relevant. And in a situation such as this, where the quantities, although it is urine, were very low from the first analysis, does it seem to you that in reporting back it is positive without raising this issue to the stakeholder? And in this case, I guess maybe you would say it's up to the DA to report it back to the defense attorney. If it's not in your report, then do you think that fails to communicate something that's really essential in a case such as this? That's my concern as I looked at it.
I don't have an opinion. Do you?
No, I think the nature of the urine and the nature of the low level and the nature of the technique mass spectrometry and the fact that there are variations that affect linearity quite often, and hence the OD for this.
But we know from the first analysis, there was nothing wrong with the first analysis. It wasn't like there was a problem with the procedure. We know from the first analysis that the measurements were below cutoff. Yet that's not in the secondary report. There's nothing to let a customer with the secondary report know that was a secondary method that was used after the first one was tested using and it was below minimum cutoffs.
No, it's not specified in the report what kind of analysis it was different from the first, being that they're done by the same methodology. they would both be indicated as triple quad analysis. So there wouldn't be an indication of it was a different acquisition method on there.
And your standard operating procedures don't call for that to be reported in the report.
No.
Now, the only reason you did this was because the police officer came back to you. I mean, you guys, your lab reported out the first report. There was nothing wrong with it, right?
Correct.
And then the only reason you used the secondary method is because it was requested from you by the customer, right?
Yes, the customer asked us to look at the secondary testing methodology.
Does the lab technician utilizing the secondary method know that the reason why they're doing a secondary method was because a police officer said this motorist has drugs in their body, you got to retest this?
No, they just follow what's being ordered for test analysis, and they are assigned those tests, and they just complete them as they go through their daily casework.
Okay, so you're, but the vendor, in this case, the Suffolk County District Attorney, the customer, Suffolk County District Attorney, they would know that information, right? They would know that the first test was below cutoffs.
They could ask that question, why they're getting an amended report.
I thought that was in the paperwork. It said that it was the district attorney's office that came to you to ask you to rerun it.
Yes, initially he asked for the analysis, or she, I can't remember which one it was. They asked for the analysis, and then when they get the amended report, they clearly know why they got it. It gets submitted to discovery.
So would it be fair to say you're relying on the district attorney to report that back to the defense or anywhere else it has to be reported to?
Well, we put it through our discovery files. Yes, they get notified through there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the Yonkers City Police Department Forensic Science Laboratory. This is a closeout of an issue we originally discussed at our September 2023 meeting involving an analyst who was not following the SOP. The SOP was updated and the analyst was re-instructed on the importance of procedural steps. During the remediation period, another quality issue occurred and the remediation period was extended. During this extension, no additional issues have occurred and the lab considers the non-conformance closed. We do have folks available virtually. Are there any questions for the lab? Hearing none. We'll move on to the Erie County Central Police Services Laboratory. This is a notification of unexpected results from the 2023 DNA proficiency test. The results relate to certain aspects of testing of the analysts that the analysts did not perform and therefore did not report results for. The lab was unaware at the time that this should have been reported. Are there any questions for the lab? Monroe County Forensic Toxicology Laboratory. This is an initial notification of a report that required amendment of results. The lab is still investigating the issue and will provide more information when it's available. We do have someone available virtually from the lab if there are any questions. Do we have any questions? And I believe, nope, I was premature. I was gonna say finally, nope, two more. Westchester County Department of Labs and Research Division of Forensic Science. This is an initial notification of an unexpected result on a biology proficiency test. The lab is initiating a quality incident investigation. Are there any questions for the lab? Hearing none. Finally, the Westchester County Department of Labs and Research Division of Forensic Toxicology. This is a notification of an unexpected result on a toxicology proficiency test. The lab believes that it is a proficiency test issue due to the stability of one of the expected results. Are there any questions for this lab? Pat has a question. So we need to elevate Chris. Do we need to text him at a time or? Oh, there he is. Okay. Chris, you've been elevated. You can unmute and turn your camera on.
Ready?
I can't hear Chris yet. I just want to make sure he's unmuted. Chris, are you there? Catherine, he's unmuted, correct?
He is not, but I have requested him to be unmuted.
Interesting. Chris, can you please try and speak? Can't come back. He's the last item. Please, Chris, talk to us. Anything? Cooler.
I'll withdraw my question. I had two quick questions.
It seems to me that should hear something again, so it should show back up on the agenda. This was not identified as a, oh, hang on, he's coming on now?
Be right there.
Is he on lunch?
I mean, I wish I were.
He usually does lunch around this time.
Does he?
Yeah. That's true. It's late.
Hey, Pat, what's the question? Maybe I can answer.
Thank you, Fitz. I appreciate it.
The question is, there seems to be a discrepancy between the auditor and Chris's opinion of why they were discrepant in their CAP proficiency test in terms of the degradation. That's what I wanted to ask. Because it seems like the audit team. Chris, you there?
Yes, I am. Here I am.
Hey,
Here we
Chris.
go. There you go. Thank you, Fitz.
I was with my assessment.
I was relying on Fitzpatrick's answer anyway, so I'm sorry that I kind of bother you for lunch. So just two quick questions based upon the olanzapine situation, where your opinion was it was the 6 days, and listen, I have the utmost respect for you, but I don't know anything about this drug. First question is was it reported by CTS, or was it your investigation that made the conclusion that the potential root cause could have been degradation from 6 days of storage?
So when we got our results back, and this is CAP, College of American Pathology, they put in their summary that due to the instability of the drug, that it is potentially lost in the transition period. So they put that in there. So the spike value was supposed to be 100 nanograms, and the consensus value was 30. So they put a notice in there that due to the instability of olanzapine, that was a discrepancy. There was a high CV, and they expected that result. They also didn't grade us negatively for not reporting it.
Okay. The other question was, now that's something that you reported to the assessor, but it seemed like there was a little bit of disagreement with the conclusion or the root cause, or did I take this the wrong way?
No, so we put in our disclosure that the issue was with the proficiency, and they just wanted clarification on what I meant by that. So my conclusion was based upon CAP's reporting that it was unstable, and I don't really know. It could be longer than 6 days from the time they prepped it to the time that we got it. So using their disclosure and our really not knowing how long the sample sat before we tested it, that's why we say it was an issue with the provider and not us.
Okay. Because it was pretty clear that there was dialogue going back and forth regarding. I think she felt that it was just seemed like too short of a period of time to produce that low of a concentration. But that I wanted your opinion of that.
Yeah, it's difficult to say because there was another analyte in that proficiency that CAP declared had the same issue. We detected that. Now, olanzapine has other issues. It doesn't just break down. It's also very protein bound. So sometimes it's difficult to extract it at those low levels. But again, I think it was an issue with CAP and not with our laboratory.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry I had to pull you back.
No, that's all right.
Any other questions? Okay. Commissioner, would you like to take the next part?
Yes. The next item on the agenda is executive session. Do I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters related to a current investigation or matters that may lead to the appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or suspension of a particular person?
The judge makes the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank
Second.
you. When I call on you, please state your vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Dooley?
Aye.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, you can just say
You can
yay
do
or
it all at
nay.
once? Okay.
You don't
All
have
right,
to, yeah.
Thank you. Everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Any abstentions?
Yes.
Who's the
Also,
abstention?
yes, Goldthwait.
Yes, Epstein.
Epstein, and who's the other? You have that, Natasha, for the record?
Goldthwait.
Okay, great. All right, so the motion carries. At this point, if you are not a commission member or staff, you'll be expelled from the virtual meeting and the streaming will be paused. The stream will resume when the executive session has ended. We will take a 5-minute break. At what time, Joe?
12:53.
12:53, thank you.
Thank you. We're just waiting for the YouTube, Commissioner.
Less YouTube knowledge, more class. Thanks for the notebook, by the way.
Thank you for your patience. We are now live on YouTube and recording on WebEx.
We are back in open session. Thank you all for your participation today. Jill, is there any other business before I move on to adjournment?
I just want to let everybody know, a number of years ago, we started an analysis of cases that involved false hair testimony. Remember that? We discussed that. And in Syracuse, at least, I just recently discovered in the last 2 years, a couple of cases that we didn't discover initially. So I'm going to do a re-review. I've talked to Scott at the NYPD lab. I think they're going to initiate a re-review, and I'm going to encourage all my 61 colleagues throughout the state, as well as all the lab directors, to do the same. I just wanted to let everybody know that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next meeting of the Commission on Forensic Science will be on June 14th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Yes.
Abstentions?
No, just really quick, no action was taken in executive session. We just want to say that on the record as well. So with that, everyone said aye, no one opposed.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
We are adjourned.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Gentlemen, it's 5:30 at the garden.